Thank you. Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our work session of Tuesday, July 25th. May I have a motion to open the work session?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, we are going to start tonight with a discussion of the Friends of Recreation and Parks, which is a good idea. So, Jill, do you wanna walk us through that? Or
I think Ed's gonna walk us through that.
No, actually, I thought you were gonna walk us through that.
I think it's a good idea. Is that enough? Is Ike with us? Ike's here.
Hi, Ike.
I did.
Alright, do you wanna walk us through it?
Sorry I couldn't be there in person. Sure, I can give the cliff notes, without all the big words. We'll start there maybe and then we'll go from there and answer any questions. But the short of the long of it is that we are trying to form a friend group to help with fundraising and various projects that are beneficial to obviously the town and parks in general. So we're looking for town board approval to allow I guess I can say the Friends group to do a contract with the Westchester Parks Foundation.
And remind me,
So
to
you're
the
breaking
Westchester,
up a little bit, Ike, sorry.
Ike,
Sorry.
the Westchester Parks Foundation, didn't they used to take a piece of it? Or if it wasn't them, it was another agency, not for profit?
I think they have an administrative fee because they are the umbrella 501(c)(3)
Right.
Corporation. So they would be the
That is
receptacle.
correct.
Yeah, so they would be the receptacle.
Do you know what they take from it?
So it depends on it's basically based on, it's a sliding scale on how much we would have or how much money they'd be managing. So I know one of the contracts they have with another municipality, it was 10% for up to $500,000, and then it goes down to 8% after that, and then I think if you get over $1 million in your fund, then it drops down to, it would like drop down to 65%, I think is what they were charging. So yeah, so it's a sliding scale based on how much money we would have in that fund. And that would not be charged to the town, that would be charged to the Friends organization.
So, I actually think it's a good idea because, you know, then it enables a 501(c)(3) to be able to raise money since municipalities are unable to do that. But just to get a little more into the weeds on it,
Yep.
who will determine how the money that is raised is spent? So, you know, my concern is that the town, and granted, we have the fabulous rec and parks master plan that you guys just did. But, you know, my concern is that money's raised and maybe some people wanna spend it on something, the town feels that it's imperative to spend it on something else, all within, you know, the view of the master plan, but who is gonna make the ultimate decision as to how any monies in there would be spent?
Well, I think the goal, would be that the town board and the rec commission and myself would all work collaboratively and have a list of projects that we're interested in fundraising for. And I don't necessarily think we need to zero down to one particular project each time. I mean, you could have a website set up where, donations can be made to a general fund, donations can be earmarked for certain projects, but I think that would be a collaboration between the three entities, myself, the rec commission, obviously the Friends group and the town board. But I mean, ultimately, any work that gets done on town property, the town board has the ultimate last say, I think, but.
Yeah, cause in my other day job, I like to say, you need to plan for the worst and hope for the best, so I get worried when it says
Right.
we're all gonna, kumbaya decide together. I think you need that ultimate decision maker, and that hopefully it would all work out, and we are hoping for the best, that everyone would collaborate appropriately, but you always need to plan that it doesn't, and have that ultimate arbiter.
So, right, yeah, I mean, there's worst case scenario, because, you always get into the power struggle, right, of who's in charge, who gets to make the ultimate decision, but I think at the end of the day, it's, you know, we would create this friend group and it's, okay, these are the projects that the rec commission thinks are important. Here's a project that the town might think is important, and why not put both of those options on the website as an, you know, for open donations? You know, and work towards both, and ultimately, maybe we push one or the other, but, you know, like, again, my understanding
you're breaking up a
is
little
we would
bit.
make a recommendation. Okay, can you hear me now, okay, or no?
We can hear you, you're just breaking, like every other word
Okay,
gets.
yeah, sorry I can't be there in person. But yeah, ultimately, we would make a recommendation to the town board, and the town board, you would have to give the green light on any project that happens on the council.
So,
Would the, so I'm just trying to understand kind of at a more basic level how this works, and you know, I'm kind of thinking of like with the school district cause I understood how like the CSF would have, they'd be a fundraising arm and then they would accept grant requests, and then the money would be given to the district to implement what was approved by that fundraising entity. But it's done in partnership. Is that a similar model that this would work under?
Yeah, you know, Holly, it's interesting, I was thinking of exactly that, and I was going to say, you know, I would assume that we would work really well together because ultimately the town board does have to approve. So I think that that's the ultimate arbiter, not that I don't think that we would, you know, use a hammer on anything, but I think that everyone would work well together. And that's what I would, you know, I would assume, I've seen it work very well with CSF, and I would use that as a great model. You know, I know that they collaborate very closely with the faculty to come up with innovative solutions, and then they fund those solutions, and then they have fundraisers where they highlight and showcase what they've done. So, you know, this doesn't have to be exactly the same, obviously it's not, but I think it's a great model that shows how these groups can work really well together, you know, between a friends group and an administration and a board.
It also takes away
So-
that complication of trying to be fundraising for a particular project. Cause it, you know, I think they've got a good model that works to raise a significant amount of money for the purpose without knowing what the specific projects are. I feel like the master plan does a good job of outlining the overall picture. I don't know that it has to be targeted projects for
no,
I
someone
agree
could
with that.
someone could easily donate, say, I have X amount of dollars, I want it for this particular project, this is the purpose, and it's earmarked solely for that, otherwise I'm not donating it.
Yes.
Right.
And that would sort of dictate how it's used, or it's not coming.
Is that
Assuming that the town had, assuming it could pay for the whole thing.
I would think that would be, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was assuming that it paid for the whole thing, or if there was monies left over and the dollars weren't there, that would change. The town had to find some of
Sure,
those dollars,
so
but
people would donate either for, you know, general purposes, general recreation purposes, or it could be earmarked for a specific reason.
So that's like, so that's what, I guess maybe the question I'm trying to get to is, would any individual donor be able to say, my pet project is X and that's the only reason I'm giving the money for, or would we have to establish certain categories or elements that would be options?
Yeah, I would be very
Go ahead.
cautious about allowing earmarking of donations, because I think then you get into that
Just
problem.
Well, we allow that now.
Two parts.
We allow that now, we don't have to accept it,
Right, that I
Can
think
I
that's.
jump in?
Right, well,
yes,
anyone can make a gift,
yes,
right, so I'm, that's already
let's just-
established.
You're right. I
So I would lean towards not lean towards, the goal would be is we would have specific projects that we are fundraising for and the general fund. So you could donate to the general fund, and in there could be a drop down menu, I wanna donate to, I don't know, whatever, a turf field, right? But no, I would steer clear of people or residents dictating what we do. So coming in and saying, hey, I wanna give $10,000 towards the dog park. We appreciate that, but that's not something, you know, our response would be, we appreciate that, but that's not a project we're focused on right now. Would you be interested in donating to X, Y, and Z? You know, I think that would be our response, but I don't think we should get into allowing
we can't solicit as, we can't solicit as a town anyway. We can't solicit as a
No,
town.
but the Friends group can, but the problem with doing that though is just given your example, if you say you can donate either the general fund or a turf field, if we didn't have enough money for the turf field, could we then use those monies donated specifically for a turf field for another project?
I would not go down that road.
I mean, I used to-
Because people are donating for a specific project, you leave that project open until you do have the money for that project, I mean, or it's gotta be a conversation with the donor, right? Like, hey, listen, we've had this open for 2 years now, we haven't been able to raise enough money, so are you okay with us putting this towards another project? Right, but,
I think that's a legal, just an easily legal
What-
question.
Yeah, what do we have, Ed?
So the town code speaks to the powers and duties of the rec commission. It's in chapter 27. One of the things that the rec commission can do is accept gifts. The town code makes a distinction though. It says the rec commission can accept personal property. If it's real property, it's got that acceptance has to be subject to town board approval. But that caveat's isn't in the code with respect to money, personal property. So one thing the board may want to consider in terms of just setting expectations and process is take a look at that provision and clarify it if the board wants to be the final arbiter of how monetary donations are spent, then you may wanna revise that part of the town code to make that clear.
For the purpose of tonight's discussion and for me to kind of understand what a next step would be if we said we all loved it, is there a resolution that has to be passed? Like, what's our responsibility in forming this?
There is a resolution. Westchester Parks Foundation wants to make sure that the governing body is on board and adopting a resolution as the way to go on record as saying that.
But then the organization, the Friends, would exist as a separate
They could,
organization, part of the
yeah, an
Westchester?
unincorporated organization that could contract directly with Westchester Parks Foundation.
I just wanna make it clear who's the ultimate arbiter of how those funds are
And I think the place to do that is in the town code.
in the town
Right.
code.
But you said right now it already
But
says
this
it's-
isn't the rec commission, this was gonna be a friends of
right,
recreation department, it's different.
I understood though, working closely with the rec commission on setting priorities, so
Yeah,
Right,
but
so-
it's not, but the money is not, it wouldn't be, to your example, what's in our code is for the recreation commission to accept monies, this would be the Friends of Recreation and Park is accepting the money, so it's,
which in
No,
turn
we'd
then
have
is,
to accept
which
it.
in turn is then transferred to the town.
So
right,
Well,
right,
why-
but that, it's not the same as what's in the code, cause the code's speaking to the rec commission,
Mhm.
this is not the rec commission.
I hear what you're saying, yeah, I still think you may wanna clarify that, just so there's no
Well, I think we should,
Well, we can make
but-
sure that the code addresses
this,
the distinction.
So
There's
what-
two steps in the
This
money
is-
acceptance.
I think this is a fabulous idea, I think it's a smart idea, I think it's long overdue. When we were building the back when we did the
playground.
geez, I couldn't do the word. When we did the playground, I actually I created a not-for-profit in terms of filing with the state, but I never took it to the next step, I didn't have the ability and time, so it never happened. It's a great mechanism, I think prior town boards, people would bought bricks and things like that for, so
The playground.
the playground they bought, like, so we need something, we should have such problems that we can't figure out what to deal with money. We should, we'll cross
Well,
that
we do
bridge.
need something, I totally agree, I think we all agree that this friends group is a great idea and it's long overdue. We just, where does that
We'll figure it out.
mechanism fit in? Like, we agree, we have a resolution that we're in favor of this, which I think we all are, and then how do you get to the next step?
I think we revise the town code,
the
that's
town code, and
where
then the Friends has
that's where
a
control it.
contract.
So Lisa,
It's the contract,
Yes.
right, cause it's not, this isn't, I think, in the town code.
What isn't, the
a friends group.
It's
Right, that's true.
But it doesn't need
It
to
still won't be.
Right, it won't be.
Correct.
What you're talking about revising in the code probably needs to be looked at anyway.
Yep.
But this is separate, so this is, once we pass this resolution, then part of the resolution says in accordance with contract that's acceptable to the town board and council.
Mhm.
Okay, that's fine.
Oh, we would have a role in the contract that gets us.
I would like to see it, so yes.
Okay.
The other
Okay.
thing, Ed, that you
But
had
but
mentioned,
now,
wait,
I
just one
just,
second.
I want to, yeah, go ahead, sure.
The
Sorry.
home rule, we were gonna talk about also modifying the code to make reference to the fact that we have home rule legislation that allows us to sell space on the back of the, around the backstop and on the field.
Right. So
which-
Yeah, we
we're
can
gonna take a
update
look
it.
at that as well to make sure that because that didn't exist until 4 years ago,
Years ago,
5 years
yeah.
ago, so
So-
we're gonna make sure we have that base covered.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Sorry,
I
So my concern here is the funds. So what's being changed in the town code that only the town board can authorize the release of funds? Because I don't think that's the direction we wanna go in.
No, I think we need to discuss it when we're looking at the contract.
Separate, is that a separate issue though? One's a statutory issue, one's a contractual issue.
Well, I mean, this organization is gonna have to get the money to a town organization, whether it's accepted by Rec and Parks, which is how it's written now,
Possibly, yeah.
or by the town board, I think is a question about whether or not we'd wanna change it. But I think what Ike is saying is he would want it to stay as it is and the funds would go for approval through Rec and Parks.
Right, so the idea would be, cause I'm thinking on smaller, we'll call more trivial projects or funding, so like, I don't know, here's an example, I used to run a wiffle ball tournament, right, in Westchester. And we were able to give away prizes, certain prizes, through funding that we raised, so like, through the Friends Group, so the Friends Group would go and give a prize or this, and I didn't have to worry about going to the town board to say, hey, I need $1,000 because we wanna do this for this program we're running, that's not, I don't wanna have to go through that. You know, obviously with big projects,
But you
like.
can layer that.
Well, maybe there would be a threshold, Ike, maybe there would be a threshold that expenditures in excess of X dollar amount need to be approved by the board.
Why should it be a project and not the,
I didn't hear
I'm
you.
sorry, we didn't hear you.
why should it should only be projects around town property? It should only be projects that are around town property, not have to do anything with expenditures of funds, but the project itself. So if the project is going to be some sort of modification of town property, then yes, the town board should have the ultimate say on whether or not it's funded, right? I don't wanna get,
And do we have to answer this question now?
No, we can
Seems
work
like
out the
this-
details.
this
Yeah,
is
we
something
need
that-
to
Yeah.
work out the
Okay.
details, I think we need to discuss this, cause that was my concern a little bit, that if the town board deems that something really needs to be done, but the rec department, and look, I think ultimately we're all gonna work well together because I think we all want the best for the community. So putting that there, but if the town board sees that something really needs to be done, but you would rather spend funds on something else, somebody needs to be able to make that decision.
Yeah, I think ultimately that you can't have a situation where the town board has no control over something significant going on
Well-
town property. So I think
You-
we're all getting to the same thing,
Yeah, the
because you're
property,
talking
not
about
funding.
major projects, so
Okay, we can talk about this further.
I think that this is I think this is a great idea and we've seen models that can be really successful like this.
Yes, agreed.
I think it would be easier to react to, maybe something closer to a proposal than
yeah, I
concept.
agree.
So I think conceptually, the town board is completely in favor of this, of establishing this, we just need to work out, how it's gonna function.
okay, so.
But in terms
so-
of
so-
letting Westchester County know, I think we'll adopt a resolution, but we are certainly in favor of this formation. We'll just need to figure out in the contractual portion of it, these intricacies.
Okay, so on that note, can we set some sort of, it doesn't have to be obviously this minute, but I just don't want this to fall back again on the back burner, so whoever needs to be involved in the meeting with the collaboration, can we work on setting a date for that in the next week or two?
Yeah, our next meeting is August 8th, I believe, right?
Yes.
So I think we can get some type of resolution done by the 8th.
Okay.
I think it's a great idea. I'd like to see it move forward.
Agreed.
Yeah, same here, I agree.
So
Thank
the
you.
board is okay with giving approval for this
Stage.
yeah, I guess the
The
stage to
stage,
move
yes.
forward?
Yes,
Yeah, well, I'm imagining on the 8th, we'd come back with some draft documents and walk the board through more of the mechanics, how we are suggesting that it be
Perfect.
implemented.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay, so
perfect.
do we have the document with Westchester County Parks to approve tonight?
No,
Nothing's been shared with you guys, just, we have a mock contract, but nothing that's been set, so I would I guess we'll hold off on it. I mean, everything that I have, I've shared with you and Ed and.
So
I
could we
mean,
do it
if
subject
it's
to approval
helpful,
of?
if it's helpful, we can adopt a general resolution tonight that says the board is in favor of the formation of Friends of Recreation and Parks Department in Newcastle, group subject to, a contract that's agreed to by council and the town board and the rec department.
you certainly can, although I think we
If that's
have,
helpful for Westchester, if we need that.
well, I don't think we need that tonight. I think we have the marching orders. I'd like to come back with a set of documents for you to look at, so you have a clear understanding as to how this is gonna work.
Yeah, I prefer
Yeah,
that.
thank you,
Okay,
Ed.
perfect.
Thank you, Ed.
Alright. Okay, thank you, thanks Ike.
Alright, thank you.
Thanks
Yep,
Christine,
thank you.
thank you guys. Alright, shall we move on to 50 North Greeley?
Where's that? I said, where's that? That was kind of
Uh-huh.
last.
Very
Didn't work, didn't work.
Alright, so just to kind of set the stage, I know we had a working group meeting, I don't know, times a few weeks ago. We had a public hearing as well. Then I think the developer, and I'll let you speak really, but came back with some changes and then an option that you wanted to present to us, so.
Shows mine.
So the floor is yours.
Floor is mine. So the last time we had a public hearing and work session, we were asked to take a look at the retail section, how to make it better. So this was, it's Ghana. If we can go back to that for a moment.
Can we put that back up on the screen? It disappeared. Okay,
This
well,
one
you
is
wanna
what you
talk
sent us.
generally while we're waiting for it?
So generally, we took another look at the retail ground floor and how to make it more usable while optimizing the frontage. So this is what it was previously. The next slide will be what we came up with, which shows you much deeper. If we can go to the next, thank you so much. So what we did was we kind of reverted back to almost what our original plan was going back about a year. This shows you deeper ground floor retail space with continuing to keep all of the open green space at the ground floor. So in this scenario, you could take the first space all the way to the north, which is about 2,220 square feet. That could be your diner. We can combine that with the next retail space that's about 1,850 square feet, whether it be all of it, half of it, make that a diner, make that a secondary retail space. Going down to the next one is 1,400 square feet, and then we have the
No,
little.
you don't have to
hold
move
on.
it.
You can
You
keep
don't
it.
have to move it.
Thank you.
So wait, can I just ask, you basically added 300, an extra 300 square feet to the total?
I
Yeah.
can tell you, hold on.
And made it much deeper, because I think the thought last time
Make it more usable.
was that obviously if we want retail, we
Right.
want it to be
More usable.
successful and usable, and those very narrow spaces were not really
So
So
we had
usable.
5,100 square feet in the previous iteration. and this is now 6,415 square feet. So
Oh, much more than that. Okay.
yeah, we went up over 1,000. Now, the small piece at the end, which we labeled arcade, it could be an actual arcade, it could be some space that we could make community. We left it there to figure out how to use it best. It could not be retail, but in this scenario, we've dubbed it an arcade for the kids in town and to make it something fun, cause it's really found retail space in our minds. But in this scenario, this is the best retail space that we took our parking study and traffic study and said if we took the first retail space of 2,220 square feet and added half of the 1850, that would really be your restaurant space. And that's what we did our parking and traffic study off of. So that's what we submitted to everybody as the restaurant space is really the biggest one we would,
No, I just,
My-
Jeff, I want you to confirm that this is usable, this is what it constitutes, usable retail space.
This is usable retail space.
So that was my question, I mean, you're adding square footage, but you're also, it seems to be adding this arcade space. So my question is, in your experience, what type of retail or business goes into a space of that shape and size?
So one of the things we did is all the spaces can be connected, they can be broken up. The arcade can actually be an arcade. We're calling it an arcade because we sat there and said,
I get that,
Kids
but
would love
what
that.
realistically could
it
it
could
be?
be an arcade. We've been pushed and pulled every which way of how to make usable retail space and how to take the frontage of this and make it functioning all the way through. So if we don't take that space and we put it to something that wasn't retail, I'd be up here explaining why isn't this retail space.
That's
So-
not
where
the
the
question.
bike
So-
storage
so-
was
That's
before.
not the
So
question.
we came up with the idea that this could be an actual arcade for kids and something that could be connected to the space next to it. That could be an ice cream place, but I know there's Franny's in town. But it could be a restaurant next door connected and actually be an arcade. That's why we wrote arcade on it. So that when asked the question, we could point and say, look, this could be a kid's arcade or an after-school activity center. We wrote arcade because we were just actually thinking video games at the time we were drawing it up. That it could be something that this is found space, it wasn't originally programmed. So if it was something that we weren't looking for the last dollar on, it could be something that was good for the community.
So in other words, the income from that space is not what's really driving the retail,
Correct.
but it's something that would activate the street and we could find a use for it that would be helpful for the
We have
community.
been, as we've been saying, we've been open to that piece of retail frontage, being creative for it and making it worthwhile. We could also turn that into some other visually active space with the park area in front of it. We wanna make it an active space for the community and arcades. To all of us that were working on designing it, sounded like a lot of fun. That's why we put it up there. We don't want it to be dead space, so we will think of every creative way to program it. It is not a financially driven retail space.
You know, I didn't include that when I said you had added about 300 square feet to the
So
project
we added
because
over
I wasn't
1,300 square feet
I
from the
wasn't
previous.
counting that arcade space
So
as
that,
retail.
so if you scroll down slightly and it has total square footages of all the retail space.
No, I know,
green
but that's
spaces.
because you're counting the arcade as retail.
It is though,
Right.
right? So all of the I mean, it's a small
Commercial.
retail space, it's all of commercial space, I mean, that's only 945 square feet. So if
Right, but without that, you've essentially added, I'm going back to the same number, you've essentially added about 300 square feet.
or
If
500 square feet,
if you,
if we can go back one
eliminate
slide.
the
Up one
arcade.
again,
anyway, it's not a big point, but if we don't count the arcade space, my point is that we haven't,
Well, the
really
arcade
added
space was there
that
in the
much.
previous iteration,
yeah,
counted in the
Why is
retail
it
space.
not there? They just made it deeper.
The arcade space was there, counted in the retail square footage.
I'm above.
It was there, it used to be utility
Is that
space and then it was
experience,
changed a
something
couple
that you can speak
iterations
to
ago.
in terms of that type of a space, its usability?
Well, yes, I can, but first, the space that he's enlarged, they've made it significantly deeper, you get a big utility space in the back.
Bob, if you could speak
I'm
in the
sorry to call you up,
microphone,
Bob,
so
put you on the
people
spot.
at home can hear you.
Join us,
My name and address,
social security.
So the larger portion of the retail space in the prior design, there was a deep utility space. Now there's a narrow utility space. I'm not sure what's going in there, but let's assume that it still fits and can service the building. It is a lot deeper. If you're gonna have a restaurant, you're gonna need a kitchen, and most kitchens are not visible from the outside. I suppose you could do a visible kind of kitchen that's, showcases and is something nice to look at, but most of the time it's gonna be walled off in the back, and you need deeper space to make it work, so I think it's a significant improvement. In terms of the space that he's calling an arcade, it's really a narrow, not great functional space that seems like it's being offered as a gift to the town because it's not really usable, it's not gonna generate income with the developer. There is a desire by the community, and he's heard from us, I think, that we wanna see some transparency and activation of the front of the building, so, I called Ed earlier today because I wanted to see if there was any materials to look at before tonight, and I got some. And we talked, I don't know if the town got it for $1 a year for a 99-year lease, it was kind of gifted to the community. Could the community find a use to program it? Could it become an art gallery for high school and middle school kids to put up? Could the town find some way to program it so that it would be attractive? If not active, it would be something attractive to look at. And that becomes a question. It can become a job for somebody to really keep that functional and interesting on a rotating basis, because you don't want to put something in it stays the same forever and nobody goes to look at it. So
Especially because it's all the way at the end, so someone has to have a reason to walk all the way back there.
right.
It's
So
not something that you pass along the way.
I mean, personally, I think our teenagers have nothing to do. If it was an arcade space, that would be very attractive to, I think, a lot of kids in town. But we don't need to worry right now as to what that retail space is gonna be. I think what Jeff is saying and what Bob is saying is that this reiteration of the commercial space is significantly more functional than what was in the last iteration. So I think that's very helpful.
The point was, the front of the space is what we started with from the initial onset of this project. We came in with retail space that would work for a restaurant and other retail. We changed that because of this whole parking conversation back then. We're back to what we originally believed is the right retail box at the corner of the property. We've been asked to activate the rest of the street front. It's difficult as the site narrows, but we think we can be creative and make something that could work. And when we keep saying arcade, it's because there's a kid in a lot of us still, and I have an arcade at my house with my kids and I play more than them. So if it's something that ends up being an arcade, that could be great. As we keep saying, that's not the financial driver of the project, so if that small piece is narrow and we can figure out how to make it work, it's not the dollar driving that piece of it, but we will figure out how to activate it and make it work. There's a lot of retail uses that are experimental, that are not retail based in the traditional sense, that maybe something there will work and be interesting and be good for the town and will drive traffic that way, because it's something that people wanna see.
Yeah,
There's
I
more
didn't
Barbie
mean to,
spaces
I
in
didn't
New
mean
York.
to imply that it was a negative, that it wasn't a real retail space. I think we can be really creative with that space. I just
That's our
wanted to
goal.
be really accurate about how much real retail space we have.
This is a lot more than a lot of our iterations, it's closer to what we designed originally. It's good retail that
Alright,
complements.
so I wanna save some of this for the public hearing. But what I did wanna talk about, which is more of a work session topic, is that as you were doing this, you came upon a second proposal that I know you emailed the board and said it's just something you were thinking about in response to some residents'
So-
thoughts, and you wanted us to kind of hear it and discuss it today in work
So
session.
we've sat through quite a few public hearings and we've gotten quite a few comments, and a lot of those comments we've heard are these are gonna be expensive large units, there's not enough affordable units, there's only a handful of them, and we think you should do better. So while going through these iterations and while playing, as we say, Tetris and moving things around, we said, what else can we do? Can we change the size of the units? Can we push and pull? What would that do to the building? Can we meet some of these requests further? Because we wanna be good neighbors and we wanna work with everybody. So if you could go to the next page, please. This is our existing 42 units. We were originally 45, but due to the end of the project where there's undocumented easement, we had to reduce it to 42 units. This is what it is today, this is what we've always been at, the mix of ones, twos, 2 bedrooms. This is what it is today, this is what we've been in with our proposal. But we sat there over the last couple weeks and if we go to the next, and this has 6.
Just for recollection real quickly, the 6 affordables before workforce, what were they proposed to be in terms of unit size?
Well, before that, this is just the 6 affordable combination, this is the original proposal here.
6 affordables.
So the next proposal I'm about to show you is what we came up with. If you go to the next page, that would have been, the original 6 would have just been a mix of 1s and 2s. So the next page, what we came up with is by shrinking the units on an average by 15 to 20%, one actually goes up in size somehow, just because of the geometrics. We said we can add 8 studio apartments to the mix. So going from the 42 units, we would go up to 50 units. Knowing we have our parking conundrum in town, or not conundrum, which we'll hear from your traffic consultant later, and afterwards we've already looked at this. We could add 8 studios to the mix. And what we thought about doing was, well, if we can add 8 studios to the mix, let's increase our affordable mix instead of having 12% affordable, let's make this building 20% affordable. And by doing that, I'm not gonna be able to see this. We said we will do 6 affordable units, 4 workforce units. Out of that, 5 would be studios, 3 would be 1 bedrooms, and 2 would be 2 bedrooms. And that would be 20.
Can you say that again? 5 studios,
3 1 bedrooms and 2 2 bedrooms.
bedroom, 2 2 bedrooms.
So you'd have 50 total units instead of 42 total units. Building would be 20% affordable, and on average, the units would be 15 to 20% smaller. In turn, those units would be 15 to 20% more affordable.
And how many workforce again, I'm
So it
sorry?
would be 6 affordable and 4 workforce.
Wait, no, I'm talking about the new iteration.
It's the new iteration, 6 affordable and 4 workforce.
Same.
So 10 total affordable out of the 50, so 20%.
Could I ask you a question?
Sure.
So you had mentioned that by making the rest smaller, in addition to having more affordable and workforce, you would make them more affordable.
Lowercase.
The smaller they
Like,
are, the
they-
more affordable they would be.
What kind of a difference do you think that
They'd be
makes?
15 to 20% more affordable just because they're smaller.
Okay, so
Right,
it's
so typically in
straight
resident-
line.
Typically, it's a price per square foot that we charge, so if they're that much smaller, it's just nominal dollars, they're that much, if it's $50 a foot for an apartment, or $40 a foot, if they're 15% smaller, they're just 15% cheaper on an annual basis.
So what would you say, 40 a square foot, is that?
Couldn't tell you today. By the time this is built, I don't know what the rents are gonna be.
What's it today?
Today, I couldn't tell you if we could finance this today. In all honesty, I'm sitting here, we've been doing this for so long, the last time I ran numbers on this was 9 months ago. I couldn't tell you if we could finance this today. And I say that,
Given that it is a seller's market right now, I feel like you probably can. It's
couldn't,
there's
I
no
can, I
house.
can honestly tell you this, I could not finance this building today if I went to a bank. Financing today is not a fun market to be in. We have a lot of projects around the country, it's not easy.
So I think what he's saying is 15 to 20% cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
It's an answer.
It's just, price per square foot across the board. It makes them more affordable, makes them smaller, more efficient.
Okay.
And can you
So-
remind me how long it would be if everything from thumbs up to build, this is short because of the,
Well, from permit, I wanna say not from a thumbs up because
that's what I meant, like,
from permit, I think we said we could be done with this project in 14 to 16 months.
okay,
Just because from ordering everything, it's like 6 to 8 weeks on the ground that we're buttoning up after we're doing our foundation. It's that much smaller. I wish Andrew was here because he's the expert on mass timber. I build.
So one of the
Just-
significant differences
Hang on, one quick thing that's important is, one thing you didn't mention is by adding 8 units, you're not adding parking
Yeah, that's
spaces
what I
for
was
those
That was
eight.
the parking conundrum comment is that
Yes.
we do not have the parking for the studios in the project, we don't have the space for it.
Right, that was a significant
Right,
difference.
so the significant difference is we don't have the parking for the studios. So, and as I'm saying, our original proposals here, this proposal we're putting to the town, we're happy to do either of them. We think this proposal is a good proposal for the town. It answers a lot of the public's comments. You'll hear from your parking consultant, our parking consultants have gone through it and there's plenty of parking, then a 5-minute walk, then a 10-minute walk during the day. If you go from 11 AM to 1 PM at multiple different times of year between March and November, there's 99 spots at a time, 150 spots at a time. If you go at night, 80 to 90% of the parking is available. So we feel that there's plenty of parking in town. Yes, if you continue to develop town, there'll be less. I think to add more affordability to town is a good thing, to have more affordable units just by sheer size is a good thing. So we're putting it out there, but again, we'll build either building.
Could you clarify one thing for me, when you say there's not parking for the studios, is that literally not a parking spot for
Correct.
people who live in the studios, not just that the numbers when you added them?
We just don't, the building the way it is with the number of spots we have,
But they will be assigned to units, is what you're,
no, we don't have enough parking to accommodate parking for the studio units.
right,
We
so
have 51 or 53 parking, 52,
You had 52.
52. So there were 42 parking spots, we needed parking for the car sharing to be able to accommodate the 1 car per unit when we had 42. Plus we needed a few parking spots for the commercial.
no, I completely understand that, I'm just trying to clarify whether no parking for the studios means if there's someone living in the studio, they will not be able to park a car, or there's just mathematically not enough to count them because you've just added them in.
We just added them in and based on the parking that we've provided and the car sharing that's being offered, there's not enough parking spots
Okay.
for the studio apartments.
So
So
whoever,
what you're saying, just to be clear, is people in studios will not be assigned an on-site parking spot.
Correct.
that's all I was just,
That-
If this
That's going to be the rule.
proposal is chosen, we will not be able to provide a parking spot for the studios.
So I guess what the board, needs to discuss in work session now is kind of the pros and cons of increasing the affordable units by 8% and making all the remaining units more attainable, less expensive at the detriment of not having 8 parking spaces
If
for those studios.
Can I add something for you to think about as well?
Sure.
He has identified 52 parking spaces in that garage. We have previously discussed that there should be 4 for the commercial employees or a number for the commercial employees and then a number for the car shares. So it doesn't mean that he can't park the 8 units, right? Before you had 42.
Right.
That's 42 parking spaces. If you're now making 50, it's 50 parking spaces. You then have 2 for potential car share. So again, the commitment of the parking spaces is how you decide the commitment should be. If you want all commercial parking to be in the parking district, you have that ability to make that decision. You're not locked into the
So
parking
there are
that was
enough
provided.
spaces for 1 per apartment plus 2 for a car share,
We could do that. There will be
just no commercial then.
parking for any of the commercial tenants, and I just have to double check if we could scroll back to the second slide for a minute.
and Sabrina, they could become part of the parking district.
Correct.
To
Mhm.
park their
Correct.
merchants in there.
That's it.
I just don't know if that service vehicle is counted in the 52 spots. It might not be.
Right, but that's just something for you to think about in regards to residential parking versus commercial parking and where you want to utilize potentially the parking district for the different uses.
And the commercial parking there was meant to be for people working in the
Correct.
in the retail or commercial establishment, okay. We do have merchant parking in town,
Right, but I think
designated merchant parking.
So my first blush is I appreciate your effort to try to accommodate so many different people's views. It's impossible. It's never gonna happen, no matter what. I think we've all learned that in life. That said, everything's a compromise if you wanna make it work. My initial feeling about this new proposal, I'm not as for it as I am the prior initial proposal, or at least the most recent iteration of that proposal. I think that affordable housing is critically important, but I look at it more not as a studio for one person. I see value if it was a one bedroom or a two bedroom. I'm not suggesting that you're gonna do more of that, but just in terms of what I see it as, because to me, it's access to education and helping kids get access. And if you have a couple more two bedroom apartments or one bedroom apartments, maybe that's more likely. A studio, you're not generally having a family of people living in a studio. So to me, in terms of when I think of affordable housing, I think of not just a affordable place to live, but also access to the services and schools.
Jeremy, just
Hold on, let's finish what I'm saying. So when I think of this new proposal, I appreciate the effort, and then the parking issue, it seems like it can be somewhat rectified if you lose some of the commercial spaces, and that's not such a bad thing, although someone's gonna have to park away, but they're not gonna be parking at 2 a.m, they're gonna be gone by then. So that doesn't faze me as much, but I'm more inclined, if we're just speaking about what you've done and how you've expanded the retail square footage and made that more usable. I think that's a step in the right direction, but to me, I'm satisfied in terms of what you've done for the housing, for affordability in the prior. I'm not, the extra studio doesn't, in my mind, move it that much. That's just certainly my opinion.
although arguably there are people other than with families, like
Very true.
you know, who wanna downsize, who might move into a smaller apartment and then their home potentially is utilized for a
But again, for me, my view of when I think of affordable housing, I think of access to education, and we don't want people having 3 people in a studio, for example. That's why you want a bigger apartment. And if that was more attainable, that would certainly move my whatever.
Yeah,
Well,
I'd
I
like to
think it does
piggyback off
both.
of that, in the sense of having families move down there, I think would, and I agree with you, Jeremy, I think it's great to attract families to make good use of our great educational system, but I think also that it adds more vitality to the downtown. I think that people with children will make more use of our, retail space and amenities in town, and I think it will bring more liveliness and vitality, which is what we want in our downtown. So for that reason also, I'm kind of leaning towards the original.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
We've been here for over a year and change. You guys have told us to build small 2 bedrooms. You don't want us burdening the school system. So our 2 bedrooms have been in all of these iterations. Let's see here. 1,400 square feet, our biggest one was 1,600 square feet, and we were told those were quite large. And how do we make them smaller? So, again.
How big are the studios, the proposed studios, do you know?
That's one thing I'm missing from this chart. I'm gonna pull it up from our prior email. So,
I appreciate your issues, man. That's the nature of the beast. You've done this before, you're gonna do this again, whether it's this municipality or another municipality, whether we're a pain in the neck or not, it is what it is. We wanna try to get it right with you. We've been very, I think, honest and upfront in trying to figure things out. And I've noticed throughout our conversation, you've made numerous references about your frustration. I totally get it. I've been up here for many years, I get frustrated too. So the bottom line is, I think you're making the best efforts, and we acknowledge that, and I really believe it's sincerely the right efforts. But I'm only speaking to my opinion about the value of a studio as an affordable as opposed to the value of a 1 or 2 bedroom as an affordable. So then it becomes a weighing thing. You've given us, ultimately, even though it's our choice, not yours, in the sense that we could, your offers are your offers, but if we're weighing them against each other, you've taken positive steps with the new iteration, but I think the original iterations, in my opinion, is better.
you're still getting 1s and 2 bedrooms in.
I get that, no, I
I
understand that.
think
No, I
the
understand.
original iteration, you're actually getting the same number of 1 and 2 bedrooms.
Correct, you're getting extra studios now.
you're getting extra,
Right, what I'm
you're
what I'm
getting
saying in my
five
opinion,
additional.
weighing that extra studios, is that value to increase the number of units? Do I need that? Is it that more important overall for units and parking and how that influences it? But it goes back to my theme of what affordability is in terms of families and children, so.
I think there's also though an element of workforce affordability who aren't necessarily families and giving options to
Teachers and firefighters.
teachers, firefighters, the landscaper. I mean, there's a lot of potential people that I could see living in a studio, and I don't think a one bedroom is really all that different from a studio. I think the 2 bedrooms is where you'll see the families. I actually really like this new proposal. I wanna hear more about traffic and parking. But I'm also inclined to think that if you're adding more studios, you're also probably drawing maybe some younger folks as well who, all the data show that they're less inclined to wanna own a car. So I don't know how important the parking spaces are anyways. So I really like it and I'm glad that you presented it. I may not be in the majority, but I like the more units and the more affordability. And I'm less scared by the parking question overall. And I love the retail as well, so thank you.
To answer the question, the studios are 650 square feet on average, which is the same size as we build 1 bedrooms for in New York City.
Yeah, that's a decent size
Yep.
studio actually. So my thought is, look, we do have a housing crisis in New York. We do have an affordability issue in New York. I like the idea of additional workforce housing. I hear from people who do wanna move out of their homes, can't afford a smaller house here, but would wanna move into an apartment here. It's someplace I could see like my mother having wanted to move into. You have other people who may want to. I am intrigued by the thought of increasing our affordability from 12 to 20%. I mean, one of the reasons I always said I would ever consider a building that was, 4 stories here is if we answered some affordability questions, and I think getting us from the mandate of 10% in downtown up to 20% really is a big step, and I appreciate you, listening to everybody who brought that forward and wanted that. I think that's very important. I have to get my head a little bit around the parking, but to Sabrina's point, and to move the commercial and the merchant parking, we're frankly thinking about, we were playing with the parking lot today anyway, Jill and I were actually thinking that merchant parking potentially should be moved. I'm gonna be talking to the Chamber of Commerce about that this week. So because there's more attractive parking than that residents could use, general town residents. I'm kind of liking this new proposal. I think that it will offer a lot in something that's sorely needed, and given the executive mandate down from the governor, and I think that this is coming, and I think if we can get ahead of it and into a project that we like in town, and your rejiggering of the commercial space, I think is much more usable, and I think it will really provide an asset and vitality to that area of the town. I'm kind of liking this proposed idea as well.
Thank you.
The one thing I would try to add back would be the car share. I would think it would be a good
We're not getting rid of the
idea
car share.
to keep, Sabrina talked about having 2 car share spaces.
Right,
There
right
were
now
2
he's
car share.
proposing 4 car share spaces and we're not certain,
Right.
there's no basis
Yeah.
for 4 versus 2. I think that it's something that if the applicant's providing it and that's part of this process, we can study the use of that car share to understand whether or not we need 4.
What I'm saying is I would be more comfortable with keeping the 4 if we're having 8 studio apartments with no parking.
Oh,
On
yeah,
site.
yeah, if if you are
Well, we
not,
have
if you're
parking on
having a
site.
short, if you're not going to provide parking for those 8 studio apartments, then the offer on the table is for 4 car share spots. But if you remove the commercial uses from the parking and you park the studio units, then the car share is gonna drop to 2 spots. But this, all of the residential will have on-site parking.
Do we
Got
have
it,
to
okay.
answer the specific use of each parking place now?
I don't think so, but you have to make a decision on which plan you like because it affects the analysis that needs to be done. And parking is part of that analysis.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm inclined to prefer the smaller units, the more affordable, being a leader there, and I think it actually makes the parking question less scary to me.
I agree with you. I do think it's unrealistic to assume that there won't be a 1 car per apartment, even in a studio. So I'm more comfortable with the thought of putting, 50 spaces, 1 per apartment, and the 2 car share, and just moving the 4 merchant parking spaces into our existing merchant parking.
So that math is a little off, so it's 52 spaces. One of those is for the service vehicle, so it's 51. So if you had 1 car for every apartment, you'd have 1 car share.
You could put that service space outside
In that zone,
in that dead zone.
In the alternate service vehicle.
In the
back
arcade.
up into traffic, that zone.
Yes.
Well, we could look at that, but I think that's probably more realistic. And it doesn't bother me to move our merchant parking into our merchant parking district.
I just think we're talking about the functionality of retail and the functionality of leasing it. You're telling retail operators that you have no way to park and
But
You can park in the parking
realistically, none of our retail district has parking within their building right now. I mean, we have merchant parking because none of our retail establishments have on-site parking, or most of them don't. So we have a designated merchant parking for those employees of our retail establishments. So that's why I don't see much of a difference taking them out from the building and utilizing those
So-
parking spaces for residents.
let's just ask the question, we have designated spots for studios and we have 8 of them. The 6 studios don't want parking spaces. So now I have 6 vacant spots that I have to keep designated for a studio apartment that doesn't want them.
Well, can't that be changed?
I'm asking the question because the way the legislation's written, it needs to be 1 designated spot per apartment, so in theory, that spot is designated for that apartment and then it's just sitting there.
And I'm assuming that you can come in and make that application, but at the same time, if you turn around and rent it again, and someone does use it
Right, there has to be
next month,
some like operational, has to be fluid, not to come in every time a lease turns.
Right, I mean, the problem is that this type of legislation is so detailed,
Something you
right, so
could do.
that's
There's
The
parking
parking.
expert.
problem here.
I've run into this issue before, actually, it was a Beacon.
Do you mind?
Do you mind coming
sorry.
to the
Stark, introduce yourself.
Yeah.
It's all yours.
Thanks, John.
Star Kip, Craig Manning, consultant for the town. Just like an idea, we've kind of floated before, this is actually Beacon, is that you number the spaces and then the spaces get assigned to the residences. You say that a minimum, like 50 of them have to be for residential, but you apply for the space when you apply for your lease. If you decide you don't want your parking space, then say that space becomes available for retail. So you're assigned, say only 42 of the units want a parking space. Spots 1 through 42 are assigned to the residential, and then the remaining 8 spaces can be used by retail or say a guest of residential, a resident, or for the restaurant, that's what they would be for. That would change over that would allow like for a fluctuation in the parking to the retail, that's kind of a risk, I guess, for the retail component. Cause all 50 spaces could be used for residents, but it kind of gives the power to the residents if they want a space or not. I think as far as attractiveness of a residential space, of a residential unit, you wanna give them the option to have a parking space. I think that's something that they'll want to have the option for. But that's one solution you could have to kind of find a balance for shared parking on the site with the retail and residential.
And then it's just really striping, so if you only had 40 of the 50 spaces utilized, you could mark the other ones guest or merchant, and then
mark them
then
as
is something turned over and they wanted a parking space, you just renumber that spot, right?
Yeah, you wouldn't mark them as guests or anything. Every space would have a number, and then whoever is you'd have some sort of like towing authority that would maintain the spaces, I'm guessing. That tower would know spaces 1 through 42 are residents. Maybe they could have a tag or something that just confirms that they're a resident of the site.
A sticker with a number.
Yeah, or a sticker, yeah. And if there's a person that's in that space 41, that doesn't have a resident sticker, they could be towed. And then the remaining spaces, that tower would know that spaces 43 through 50 are fair game for retail or residents or so on.
Car sharing.
Yeah.
Or additional car sharing, right?
Well, with the car sharing, I think that it's important to note that the car sharing would fluctuate between, I guess, 2 or could fluctuate between 4 and 2 because say all 50 residential units want a parking space, then all 50 spaces will be taken.
They're also less likely to want a car share if they all have a car. But
Right,
so
yeah.
there'd be I assume there'd be less demand for car sharing if everybody has a car, and then more demand if
Right.
say the studios all say they don't want a spot. So I feel like that's actually a good place to flex up and down.
Yeah. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you.
And I don't know that an additional 8 studios would have a significant secra impact on anything in terms of, our schools, even if they each had a student. I don't know that that would have a significant, 8 units is gonna have much of a significant impact.
I imagine not, but we're still gonna wanna plug it in and just check the numbers.
Sit down, so 8 units on what, Lisa, I didn't hear what you said.
Would have a significant secra impact on school or traffic.
Yeah, we need to
We'll plug it in,
we need
but-
to do the analysis to come up with that determination. It does not appear that it will off the top, but we need to verify.
So,
I'd like to hear more, I'd like to hear from the community when we open the public hearing.
of course.
So I'm really on the fence, I really like Jeremy's thinking about attracting more families, but then again, I'm not sure how many families 1 bedrooms would attract. As opposed to studios. So I'm just I'm really on the fence about it. Jeff, I'm not sure does this make a difference to you? Because
No,
you've made
but
it our option, so.
No, but my question is, you're making it like it's you're getting the units in the original plan, this is in addition to that. So it's
Right.
as if you're saying, I want more units for families, but you're getting the units in the 42 scenario, you're getting more units.
These are more new, okay,
Right,
I
it's
understand,
the same
right.
number of 1 bedrooms
They're a
and
little
2
bit
bedrooms, in other
smaller
words.
in this scenario,
Right.
the units, but they're not.
So they're more affordable, right, I mean,
Right.
that's the part that I like.
Right, so your general units across the building are a little bit smaller to accommodate and adding more studios. That means everybody's units are more affordable, and in turn you're getting 8% more, so you're up to 20% affordable units. You're getting 4 more units
Right.
in the mix.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I
you're getting-
definitely like that it's more affordable,
Yeah.
and the parking
Sorry.
issue, I think you've addressed, Sabrina has addressed that.
I apologize, Vicky, I
Yeah,
jumped
go
over.
ahead.
I apologize.
Yeah, Jeremy.
And we've discussed before about, and people brought up in the community about kids with special needs and need assistance with housing, who wanna stay home, that may not be an affordable housing. I'm just curious, is there does zoning allow or legislation allow to create that type of housing? As opposed to affordable, it's for I don't know how you would define it, but for children who might have, again, special needs, but can live on their own. Because I think there'd probably be families in this community that would like to, and when I think about it that way, might like to access a studio so that their adult child could stay close to them. But even if that adult child is getting supported by the family that's not in that income bracket.
Yeah, I am actually not familiar with all of the program details of AFFH, because that's the only place where we could find something like that. We're only talking about two categories here, AFFH and the workforce. And the workforce is a purely creature of the town code. Something, I don't know if Sabrina knows, but it's.
I don't.
Yeah, we could look into that. I don't know the answer.
That to me would make it vastly more appealing.
3 of the new studios would not be affordable. They would just be,
I get it, I'm
I'm
just if you can
looking at
have certain
numbers.
designated, I don't know if you can, or certain qualifications.
Right, I mean, the AFFH stays at 12%,
Right.
right? That's not changing.
so. Alright, I mean, I think
Traffic consultant?
well, that's gonna be in the public hearing. So I guess we've talked about it amongst ourselves, obviously public who's here, I'd like to hear from them. And then hopefully by the end of this, we can give you a little bit more direction. And if we do a secra analysis based on the additional units, but then choose to only have 42 units, then we're covered either way, correct?
Well, you already have an analysis based on the 42 units
Right.
and the traffic consultant is here to talk to you tonight about that. We would need to go back and run the numbers on the 50 units and he would verify, if the same opinions hold. So you would have both analyses if you decided one way or the other at this point.
And how difficult would that be?
So the question is, how difficult would it be to rerun the analysis?
For 8 additional units?
The AKRF, which is the applicant's consultant, the information they provided without going into it would just be a simple update to their letter. I don't wanna speak for how many labor hours it would take them. But I think it would be relatively simple. It would then set a higher bar, and if you do go back, then you would say, depending on the findings of that analysis, we could couch it and say you've reduced the units, you've reduced the impact.
Right.
But
Okay.
I assume it'd be something pretty simple for them to do. But again, I don't wanna speak for them.
Alright, okay, thank you. Okay, does anyone else on the board have anything here? Otherwise, we'll table it for the public hearing. Okay.
I think we're gonna table the next item.
Yes, that's premature.
The next thing is just authorization to purchase paving services. This is our annual paving award. It's in the amount of $1,437,204, so understandably, we bring it to the board to let them know about the large expenditures. Bart has included a list of roads that he hopes to be able to pave this year. The board has already approved the award of our paving bid to Montesano Brothers. So we do an authorization, but it's just a pro forma so that we can proceed with this. And the board is aware of an outstanding large expenditure.
Yes.
Okay.
Alright, anyone have any questions? Okay.
That'll make some people pretty happy.
Some people happy, some people not, so she will be next week. This was just more of an FYI that we are aware of Governor Hochul's executive order on housing. We are waiting to get more information and we will bring it back to the board, but I just wanted everyone to be aware that it is on our radar. And we're looking for more information to go forward.
That's what my supervisor's report is about in the newsletter tomorrow too.
Alright, don't wanna steal your
Already
time.
written.
And if the board's okay, I'll just quickly go through the administrative items. Alright, we've got our payment of claims, adoption of monthly report. The general liability insurance renewal, as I mentioned earlier, is gonna be tabled. We're waiting for a second proposal to come in. We're hoping it'll be a little bit more competitive than our first. We're asking for authorization to establish a capital project for the DPW Millwood Water Treatment Plant roof replacement, so we can start expending some funds on that. We'd like to extend the contract for the coach bus transportation. It's for 1 year, extension of the contract with the same terms, same cost. Next is authorization to award the RFP for the visioning and community-wide survey. This is to Nexus Creative and Pace Land Use Law Center. It's gonna be for $18,700 with an additional $12,000 for any additional visioning and or pop-up meetings that the board may wanna have. We figured that since the board had already expressed interest in having additional meetings, we would include them in the initial authorization, just so that we wouldn't have to come back and forth and it wouldn't hold up the project.
Jill,
But
shouldn't
this
it
is
say
not the
engagement?
Marist survey, right?
No,
It's not a
there's an
survey,
error.
I think survey is the
shouldn't
wrong
say
word.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
There's an error,
It
it
just
is
vision,
the
yeah.
RFP for the visioning and outreach, community-wide outreach,
Sorry.
period. That's the
But isn't,
survey.
wasn't that part of Pace's
Not the survey, they
proposal?
would be coordinating with our survey consultant. They
But
we have not
remember we
hired.
said we were gonna hold off on the survey
Correct.
because we're not sure if we want to do that.
Right. So this,
Correct.
the survey is there in error in that title. It should say community-wide outreach.
But isn't the community-wide outreach part of the proposal from
No.
Pace Land Use Center? There
This
has
is
a
Right,
all
the
meeting
visioning,
there.
the
proposal,
pop-ups.
this is all the
pop-ups.
proposal from Pace and Nexus.
So why do we need another RFP?
We don't.
We are
Oh, this is
accepting,
awarding,
we're accepting.
I thought it was, yes, okay. Never mind.
Okay. We've got a resolution in support of the Smart Growth Community Planning and Zoning Grant for the CFA to undertake that community-wide visioning and outreach to cover the costs.
And surveying, there should be surveying there.
You're just killing me. We're gonna include the survey if in fact we use it, if we get the money for it. It's one of those things we get reimbursed if we're lucky enough to get it. Next is a resolution authorizing the supervisor to sign a declaration of utility easement for 233 South Greeley Avenue. Is there someone here from Cuddy and Fetter?
Yep.
Hi, you Max?
Yes.
Thanks so much for
Oh.
sitting through.
My
Since this is an easement that most of the board has not heard of before, we're hoping that the attorney for Cuddy and Fetter for the applicant can just briefly go through this just to bring the board up to speed.
Yes, good evening, board members, supervisors, staff. Maximilian Mahalik with the law firm of Cuddy & Fetter on behalf of Pamela Thomas Graham, property owner 233 South Greeley Avenue. This is all about water, and we have a well on the property that has had contamination issues in the past. I believe some of that was actually discussed with the town board in 2011 when the property was annexed into the town of Newcastle. Looking at this water quality issue and looking to provide the property with clean, safe, reliable drinking water, we would like to tap into an extended water main, and this is the Newcastle water main. There's just a little bit of a predicament where, so you have the property annexed into Newcastle. The Greeley Avenue right-of-way in front of the property is actually in the town of Mount Pleasant, and the where Greeley Avenue crosses into Newcastle is where the water main is, the Newcastle water main. So there's kind of a multi-step project here where there would be a new private water service line running from the property into Greeley Avenue, and then that would connect into an extended water main, being the Newcastle water main. So as a part of that, there are agreements with both the town of Mount Pleasant and the town of Newcastle. Last week, the town of Mount Pleasant granted a license for us to install the private water service line under Greeley Avenue, and they voted to approve also the utility easement that is before the board this evening. And what this utility easement would allow is to allow for that water main extension into the town of Mount Pleasant. Now, our team, we would be funding the work, we would be undertaking the work, but because it is the town of Newcastle's water main, we needed an easement between the two towns to allow the extension of that into the town of Mount Pleasant. And happy to answer any questions.
Now you know why I had
Clear
Max
to me.
explain it.
Thank you.
And if there's damage, the homeowner is responsible for that.
Road opening permit, all of it.
Yes, that'll be through the permitting process and there'll be the insurances that are required.
And our water department is fine with this, they've looked it over, it's not an issue for them.
Alright,
Thank you.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yes, good luck.
Sorry to have no questions for you and make you stay.
I have 2 more meetings this week, I'm sure I'll get questions. Thank you.
Next is a resolution authorizing the release and termination of the sewer easement agreement for Newcastle Fire Department number 1. Does the board have any questions on this? This is an easement that they thought had not been recorded, and so we extinguished it. Turns out it was recorded, and now we're going back and doing it again. So there's a resolution authorizing the acceptance of the cash bond agreement for 35 Hammond Ridge Road. It's a 5-year maintenance bond to guarantee plantings. Next is authorization to approve a maintenance bond for the Gedney Parkwood Timber Retaining Wall project that we just finished. It's from Landy, it's for 2 years from the date of acceptance, and it's in the amount of $209,625. Next is a resolution setting a public hearing to consider the application to extend the King Greeley Sewer District to a property on Evergreen. And that's gonna be for September 12th. We've got 4 officers who will be attending the 2023 annual juvenile training officers training conference. It's the basic school for resource officers that we spoke about earlier. Next is the Chiefs Conference from October 13th to the 18th for Chief Carroll. Next is an application for an entry permit for Metro North Railroad for the Churchill Brook Culvert. As part of our continued commitment, we have to clean the culverts that run along Patricia Brook. We had our goats handling the overgrowth in one part of it, and as we continue down Tertia Brook along the railroad, there's some sediment that has settled in the culverts. We have to clean it out. This is so that Tertia Brook does not flood Metro North's railroad tracks. And for that honor, they're charging us $15,000 in something called a force account to cover the cost of their flaggers while we perform the work under their tracks. And so they assure me that this is a amount that we will get change back, like from your dollar, but it's $15,000, and I just need the board to be aware we need to authorize our expenditures so that we can fix Metro North. Yeah. If it sounds like this is an expense that we should not be incurring, you're absolutely right. Metro North is what Metro North is. The next after that is authorization to close a capital project. This is for Amsterdam Soccer Field number 1 renovation. We had received a SAM grant from that, and we're able to close the project with a bit of a balance being returned to general fund. And that concludes our work session. Any questions on anything? Okay.
Alright, so then can I have a motion to close the work session and open the town board meeting, please?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Alright, we're gonna skip a lot of this just in terms of announcements though. The annual Chappaqua Sidewalk Sale is starting this Thursday through the weekend, and all the merchants or participating merchants are having sales. There'll be entertainment and music, so I hope everyone supports our local merchants. Jill, did you have anything for your administrator's report?
2 quick things. First, tomorrow is Records Retention Day, so Town Hall is actually closed to the public. Staff will be here. We have mandatory records retention, and we need to dispose of records pursuant to state retention guidelines. And I'm just gonna mention something real quickly that I know that Lisa is gonna have in her supervisor's report, and that is road safety in SANAPRO. It has come to our attention that in 3 separate instances, SANAPRO employees who have been clearing garbage and refuse have been hit by cars illegally passing. We have to be more patient and more careful when we're out there. If there's a garbage truck in front of you, and they're stopped, there is an employee of SANAPRO that is working to clear your refuse and your garbage. Please be extra careful and wait for them to wave you around as opposed to just being impatient and hitting the gas. There's gonna be somebody walking around that truck. So thanks very much.
Thank you, and yes, that is in my supervisor's report as well. Luckily, I think 2 of the incidents were actually not Newcastle residents, but that doesn't mean that we should not all slow down. You can get there 2 minutes later. I'm gonna skip everything from the supervisor's report, and we'd like to get a quick update on the progress of our culvert replacements, speaking about driving slowly on detours.
Very good segue.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Okay, I think we are on track for the construction. I think today is the 21st day of 120 closure, and we are about maybe 55% complete.
55?
55,
Okay.
yes. And so hopefully by next week at this time, I think the new culvert should be in. We are more or less 75% of the culvert is already there, replaced, and the remaining 25% will be done in the next 4 to 5 days. So contractor is working 6 days a week, of course weather permitting. We lost I think 4 days out of this 90. I think today is the 21st, so he's not working on Sundays, but we lost another 4 days because of weather. So everything is going on well. I think as we have a Newcastle Police Department officer at the Hunt Place intersection. I'm sure you all are aware of that. That helps us, but still there is congestion on because of the difficult intersection, 5-way intersection on Douglas, but it is being controlled. We are trying our best to ease that congestion. So if you have any questions, I think otherwise we are on track to complete probably on or before 18th August.
Wow.
Just that's wonderful. I like being on time.
Someone knock on wood.
Is there are there any signs or any additional things you can do to remind people on these detours to slow down?
You know what, we have enough constructed detour signs already installed, but if you feel that you have something you would like to add, let me know about it. I will definitely run it with our designer and surely, but I think we have enough signs at all key areas.
Yeah, not in terms of notifying people of the detour, more notifying people to slow down on the detour, because we're hearing of people, you know, trying to go very quickly around those
See, the
residential streets.
Yeah, the problem is most of these motorists, we are noticing that they ignore these signs. Even at the Kip Street junction, they come very fast. So we have a flagger from the contractor
Yes, I've seen
who is directing them on the, I'm sure you have seen it. So the Hunts Place intersection is controlled by a police officer and a flagger is there at the Kip controlling the traffic. So we will look into it, okay, let me discuss this with my contractor as well and see if we can add maybe slow down signs at some key areas,
Okay, thank you.
okay?
Right, any questions? Right,
No,
thank you.
thank
Keep
you,
up the
thanks.
good work.
So I actually think the last time we may see you is August 8th, because that's the town board's next meeting, and after that, we don't meet again until September. So I think you may be come by after that next meeting. So if we can impose upon you one more time.
Yeah,
To come to
obviously
the
I can
meeting.
come
I'll
to
send you an
yes,
Perfect, yes.
We will have the culvert in place and
Thank you so much.
okay, thank you so much.
Perfect,
Thanks.
thank you. Alright, so now we are going to open it up for public comment and new business not related to 50 North Greeley. That public hearing we will open right afterward. So if there's anyone here with public comment or new business,
There's somebody online.
I will. Alright, is there anyone online?
Yes, we have one person.
I'm online.
Hi Rob.
Can you hear me?
Yes, if you can just
Okay.
state your name for the record, please.
Rob Fleischer, town of Newcastle, Old Hill Road. I wanted to talk about Community Day. I have attended many Community Days during my 18 years as a resident. And when you walk into Community Day, which I believe is a joint program between Rotary and the town, basically politically affiliated booths are front and center, as opposed to booths from the dozens of community organizations that we have in our town. I think that it would actually be highly beneficial for the town if we can make efforts to depoliticize Community Day. I think that our elected officials, whether they're town elected officials or whether they're a state or county or whoever they may be, have lots of opportunities to access town residents, including town halls, the farmers market, coming to town board meetings, legal events. I think there's opportunity there, and I'd love to see them take more advantage of that. So, I just don't think the community day to me, as I've watched it over time, it shouldn't be, you walk in and we've got it looks like it's political party city, as soon as you walk in, as opposed to all these other good organizations that we have in our town. So I'd like to get thoughts on the board for that. I know there are 2 months from now until Community Day, but I also know we don't meet that many times before Community Day. And I also don't know how to properly have this conversation given the fact that 4 of the 5 board members are either running for office or Holly is the president. I believe Holly is the president of the Rotary Club Chapla. So Ed, you can provide me guidance on that. So I don't know. I think people can give feedback. I don't know how to do that, just given the composition of the board.
I haven't heard anybody complain about this other than you. It's the first time I'm hearing this. I don't have any objection with it. I think people can pick the spaces they want, go to the booths they want. No one's been accosted in my experience. And I don't think it's something to dabble in. That's my view.
So I've actually heard from a number of people, including Rob, about this issue, actually. And I know last year there was an issue where members of one political party were running after taking pictures of residents who happened to shake hands with a member from another, or a candidate from another political party, and it did become very contentious and not what I would like to see as our community spirit. So it's something I think we would need to talk about. I mean, the town does, Rob, you're right, co-sponsor this with Rotary, we do. But it's a Rotary event, so we need to talk about that. I did, because I for full disclosure, I heard this from a lot of people, and I did text Holly about this earlier this week or last week. But I think it's something we should think about, and because I do believe even if you didn't wanna move them, get rid of them, even if we moved those groups so they were more maybe on the outskirts and not right when you walk in, maybe that would be helpful. I don't think that's a difficult change. And certainly I think it's something we should discuss. My concern a little bit, and I don't know, Ed, I know like with Chat Pack and other events that we've sponsored, we've actually specifically said no political groups because we felt that, especially as a municipality, once you say yes to one political group, you can't say no to another. And there may be groups that we didn't want necessarily at Community Day. So I don't know where that puts us in terms of a municipality and what we're allowed to do.
I think we're in the same territory, when you're creating a forum as a municipality as opposed to like say having just a park or a sidewalk, but you're actually creating the event. You can establish some content neutral parameters as to not who's going to attend. I think we're just talking about physically occupying a table, as I understand.
Right, anyone's entitled to attend.
Right, so if we're talking about who can physically park a table or a tent, then then I think the town could craft rules around that.
I'm not really sure.
And I would mention too, I'm sorry, my apologies.
Holly?
I'm just not really sure, I mean, how deep in the weeds we want to get with this. I mean, the positioning of the tables and the stage with the registrations, and it feels like that belongs a planning meeting rather than a town board discussion. I can speak for the Rotary Club that we have not heard the same feedback, but I mean, I do.
I don't think the Rotary would hear it because the president of the Rotary is somebody, as you've been there, I don't think anybody would come up to you and say that.
we have an email.
But I would say that, just to clarify my position, I don't know what other people have mentioned to Lisa, I'm not looking to get rid of every political organization there. I just don't think they need to be front and center and have like the prime spots. Where it seems like Community Day is you know, a political event.
And is this a
You know,
conversation?
I think the community organization should have the prime spots right in front,
Well, yeah,
and they should be elsewhere.
I think in terms of where people's spots are going is really kind of something that we could talk about with Holly offline. But in terms of if the larger question, I guess the reason why we would even talk about it here would be if the town board wanted to adopt something similar to what we've done at Chapac, where we've said for those events, we don't want political, or I think we've said, I don't remember, political events to be held there, so that because we don't have the option to then say no to anyone, and even though it's co-sponsored with Rotary, you then wouldn't be able to say no to anyone because it's on town property and it's a town co-sponsored event.
Yeah, I mean, the Rotary works very closely with Jill and the right department, so I definitely, if this is a conversation that the town wants to have about Community Day, certainly open to it, but I don't think I don't think that it's reasonable to make any changes for this year, and if the town board did take an action like that, it would present some complications when it comes to the fundraising ability of the event and things like that. So I feel like we could maybe continue this as a Rotary Community Day when we start looking at next year, unless the town board is taking up something separately imminently.
But how could the placement of booths be something that's gonna impact fundraising? Do you?
No, it won't, but that's something we could talk about offline,
Yeah, the
about
placement,
the
there's
placement of booths.
there's the placement and there's time to discuss that, and we have a
Okay.
meeting set up for August to do that. I don't feel like that's, I don't know, I just don't feel like
Okay,
it's-
well,
That's not a-
okay, the only other question I would ask is people understand, how many booths are politically affiliated at Community Day?
I don't
You know what,
this is-
I'm not
this is
sure
way off
that,
track.
I'm not sure that we really
Yeah,
need
this
to
is
answer these
ridiculous.
questions
Okay.
now. I feel
Well,
like this is really.
the only reason why I'm bringing it up here is just
Rob,
because
excuse
there's so few meetings.
me, Rob, I just feel that there's something really inappropriate about this, because you're opening up a bit of a Pandora's box, depending on who's sitting on the town board, making decisions about which political parties and where the tables would be. I mean, I have to say, I imagine if we were.
How can Holly be president of Rotary?
No,
This is-
I don't
She's
think-
evolving.
I just
Rob,
think,
I-
I think this
we're-
is
we're done with
inappropriate.
this.
I actually don't think it's inappropriate, I think what he's asking, I think placement of tables is not for the town board to decide, that's something Rotary deals
That's
with,
why
and
it's
if we need to
inappropriate.
talk about that.
Yeah.
What I think Rob's question was, or at least what I took it from what I've heard from residents as well, is should the town board make a decision that at events that we co-sponsor, we don't want them to be political, one party or the other, and should we say, much like we do at Chapac, that those type of booths or groups and events that we sponsor are not something that we're willing to sponsor because we are representing our residents who are Polka Dot. I think that's the question, it's a larger question, is that something as a town board we wanna say for events that we're sponsoring or co-sponsoring significantly, do we wanna make the decision that it shouldn't be political?
I think this is a non-issue. I know Mr. Fleischer has an agenda everywhere he is, whether it's on social media, whether it's in person,
I
whether
don't
it's
think
here.
we have to insult our
No, it's
residents
not
for a
insulting, it's a
legitimate
fact.
question,
This is a fact.
Jeremy.
This is a fact. So this is it's a conversation that repeatedly has occurred in some various forms. This is not the forum for it. I've never heard this in my 16 years, well, I've been here since '06, so 16, 17 years, been on the town board, I ran in 2015. I have not heard one person say boo about this to me. It'd be shocking that I know no one, people were that upset. So if it's that much of an issue, by all means, people should start emailing the town, reach out to other people other than Lisa Katz and tell us this. I mean, we're an hour behind. This is, I think, an effort to maybe move an agenda a certain way, so.
I would say if this were 2 years.
Jeremy, I wouldn't come to myself to a different meeting.
I think, no, Rob, I think we
I wouldn't
allow
come
our
myself to a
residents
different
to
meeting,
speak.
other than the fact that there are only two meetings left, I think, before Community Day. Only before I brought it up now.
Thanks, Rob. I think we allow our
But
residents.
Jeremy, have a good time, do whatever you want to do.
Okay, all right, Rob. I think we allow our residents to speak, that's what public comment is about. He's allowed to say something without you maligning our residents. I think if there's a legitimate concern, which they're allowed to bring that up to us, and we're allowed to discuss it.
Lisa, if the people have complained to you in such numbers, I would ask in the future to share that with the town board so that we can understand this. This is the first in all my time that I've heard this.
And the Rotary Club should certainly be on the list to hear directly if there are concerns.
Okay, I will have people email you and the town board directly.
You know, I would just say that if we were 2 years ago, we wouldn't be hearing this
Oh, no,
from
I don't
this
think so.
individual. So, you know, I think I think this has the potential to be used politically, depending on the year, depending on the people who are involved.
I think that's an odd
So
supposition.
I think that this is something we should stay away from.
I think this is an easier year because we have an uncontested election.
Right, it's actually a good year to do it, but okay, all right, thank you, Rob, we'll continue to discuss it. Maggie?
My name's Margaret
Thank you.
Ferguson. I would urge the town board to stay away from this topic. If the idea is town's co-sponsor of Rotary Day because it's on town land, if that's the idea,
We also spend a lot of money.
but that's town property, that's taxpayer owned land, let free speech reign. So what happened with the photographs last time, so what? Everybody's grown up who was involved with that. People take pictures, they take pictures. Our group has been accused of being political when we had nothing to do with politics, just we endorsed candidates, we endorsed your slate, but before that, we had nothing to do with politics and we still are called political. So please, stay away from, as Vicky says, this Pandora's box. Let the Rotary handle it, it's been handled for decades, very well by the Rotary, and an old timer in the Rotary told me the Republicans are on one side and the Democrats on the other side, and that's how it's always been done. I don't know if that's true, but that's what somebody that I'm sure you know.
That's why I ran as an independent, so I don't.
Well, that's fine, but I'm just saying, this is a slippery slope, and whatever happens, we can handle it, all right? I mean, but this is to start saying that something that's quote political can't be there is really gonna be a problem and a constant headache. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
mean, I like to, if somebody brings something up, allow the board to discuss it and see, what we think, so, thank you. Any other public comment, new business? Anyone online?
No other hands online.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now we're gonna move to our public hearing on the net zero carbon legislation for 50 North Greeley. Can I please have a motion to open the public hearing?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, where do we wanna start? Sabrina, do you wanna?
I'm happy to start. I'm going to share my screen. So we need to kick whoever's on there off. I'm gonna share my screen and share with you a PowerPoint presentation real quick, just to explain to you the seeker process and where we are today. Okay, so as you know, we've been reviewing 50 North Greeley. What we're really doing is using 50 North Greeley as an example of a project regarding the NG0 special permit legislation that you are considering. So, in accordance with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, all projects undertaken by an agency must be examined in their context of environmental significance. So if you are funding a project approving a project or directly undertaking a project, you need to measure that project in accordance with the environmental impacts that that project may or may not present. So under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, as a lead agency, you are required to balance environmental impacts with social and economic factors in making your decision to approve, to undertake, or to fund a project or an action. So the legislation that you're considering is an action. We are looking at adopting legislation to be added to the town code to create a special permit provision. This is a map of the seeker process, and you've seen this before. It really steps out how you go about determining whether an action, in this case adoption of that legislation, is making a significant impact on the environment. I circled, the yellow circle on this diagram is an indication of where we are today in relation to reviewing the legislation in accordance with the State Environmental Quality Review Act. We are reviewing the project, reviewing and the criteria and making a determination under SECRA as to whether or not there's an environmental impact. So we haven't made a decision yet whether there is a positive impact or a negative impact. Okay, so we're still at the point where we are assessing the information to make that determination. Just to clarify, when we talk about seeker and the action that you're looking at, we're looking at legislation. So that is the proposed action. It's an amendment, it's to the town code under our special permit provision, and that's 60-430 of the town code. There are currently 19 other special permits listed in that section of the code. This would be the 20th special permit listed in the town code if you were to adopt it. So this isn't anything different than you've done before. What's different about this project is you are creating special legislation that requires heightened green building elements, heightened energy standards. You're contemplating additional affordability. So you're creating the special characteristics of this special permit that will then be implemented into the town code. Okay? The where of this proposed action is development on the former Rite Aid site, which has been a vacant site for approximately 4 years. So it's a very limited geographic location where this special permit could apply. So how do you take legislation and do an environmental impact on legislation? We are looking at the concept plan that is being presented by 50 North Greeley as that concept under the special permit. All right, so it is representative of how that legislation will be implemented. So you're not taking words, you're not taking legislation and saying there's no environmental impact. You're actually examining a concept project as representative of how that legislation would be implemented. What does it mean to look at environmental impact? On this screen, there are 19 categories of impact. Every project that the town reviews, whether it is the planning board, the zoning board, or the town board, is measured against these 19 characteristics under the State Environmental Quality Review Act. You will notice in this slide that some of these impact areas are lighter in color. And there's a paren around them saying not relevant. Off the top, geological features, not really making a play given the geography of this special permit of this legislation. Air, not really relevant. It's a construction project. It's nothing out of the ordinary. It doesn't meet the state's impact criteria for impact. So each one of these elements, there's a list of criteria that the state says you must consider when you're assessing. Historic and archaeological resources. This property does not have any historic or archaeological resources that we know of right now. not relevant. So when we look at the impact areas that we do need to focus on, land, surface water, groundwater, flooding, aesthetic resources, open space and recreation, transportation, energy, noise, odor and light, consistency with our comprehensive plan, consistency with our community character and socioeconomics. All of those impact areas you have been discussing since they walked in with this application. Okay, it is our job to take the information that has, well, mine and legal's job, to take the information that has been submitted regarding this application, measuring it in accordance with the state standards and even some local standards, and determining whether or not there is an adverse environmental impact. Now, for example, when it comes to energy, due to the standards you're setting in this legislation, there is an impact on energy. It is a positive impact on energy, and that you are creating a development that is more energy conscientious than any other building project. So it is a positive impact. It's not an adverse impact. Transportation. You have, after I present, you're gonna hear from our transportation consultant. They're gonna give you their analysis on the 42 unit project as to whether or not there is a traffic or parking impact. So with each one of these areas, we will run that assessment based on the information that has been submitted. And that's kind of what I wanted to introduce to you tonight. After this, go back to this chart, and it's hard to read, but you did get a copy of this presentation in your packet. We will need to prepare at what we call an environmental impact assessment. That is a document that you will receive in draft form that assesses each of the 19 categories. That is what you will base your determination of significance off of. We will provide you with our professional review of a determination of significance. You can either agree with it or not. We will also guide you as to whether or not that environmental determination is a conditioned environmental determination. For example, transportation. Parking may not be an environmental, rise to the level of an adverse environmental impact, but you may decide you want that car share, and that becomes a condition of your environmental determination. And so those conditions that we think may be relevant to each of the impacts, we will also provide them to you as part of that environmental analysis. So the next step, once you decide on which project you want to examine, we are going to give you a document that assesses each of these 19 categories. That's all I have for you tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions. Ed, I don't know if you want to add any information.
Does anyone have any questions?
Not directly on this, but it's an issue that you know, I think some people on the board brought up about fire protection. And it's not necessarily at this point in time, when we received a letter from the fire chief in Chappaqua, for the fire department. I spoke to him today for about a half hour, and he had shared some concerns, and I shared them with Ed, and some of us have discussed as well, due to the wires access from the street for their apparatus to get to the top is not something that can be done in the current condition. So Ed, if you could just briefly explain, if that's not a conversation for now, when does that conversation happen?
You know, it's not a now conversation in the sense that we need to solve and
Right,
answer
to
all
be
the questions for
clarified,
now,
it's a question for now, but it's right.
You know, it's a good question to raise now and get ahead of, especially for the applicant, because the memo that you're referencing is indicating that undergrounding of these utility wires is gonna be very important to making this code compliant, and if there's no solution to that, should know that sooner rather than later. But that said, the legislation doesn't deal in that level of detail. SECRET doesn't deal in that level of detail. That will come later if the legislation is adopted and the applicant comes back with a special permit application that fleshes out the details behind the concept plan that we've been looking at. And then if and when a special permit is granted, the applicant has to go through another process, that's a building permit application, and then it's granular. Then you've got blueprints that show exactly what the plan's going to be, what the building is, how it's going to be built, and how this issue with the wires is gonna be dealt with, because that application goes to the building inspector, who's now applying state code requirements. So that's when the rubber meets the road on that issue, but it's not too soon to raise it now and talk about it to make sure we have a comfort level with it.
So I'd like to interject, particularly regarding the fire and safety. Ed is telling you that during the building permit process, the granular details are reviewed by the building inspector. The building inspector is also the town's fire marshal. So he coordinates with the fire departments, but that individual is making sure that the fire codes are adhered to in relation to the building construction. So Ed is correct, you can talk about it right now, but the wires and undergrounding, that is not a code requirement, it is a preference, and it is easier to fight a fire if there are no wires in the way. But there may be technical difficulties in achieving that given the length of street and where the junction boxes are in relation to the wires. So again, until it's looked into, until the details are provided, it's hard to determine whether or not that is feasible. There may also be alternatives that the fire department or the fire marshal may say, and that's something like putting sprinklers on the roof if you cannot remove the wires. So there's kind of the best case or the best case scenario, removing the wires, but then there's alternatives that will be explored through the building permit process to ensure that fire safety and the codes related to fire safety are adhered to.
And to be clear, the draft legislation talks about undergrounding of utilities, but that's referencing those that are actually gonna service the building, not the ones that are existing on the street.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? All right, before we hear from our traffic consultant, and I don't know if the applicant wants to speak first as well, Ed, we had a number of comments asking about whether if the board approves this special permit, that opens the door to other landowners in town taking that special permit and demanding that it be applied to their property. So I know you wrote a privileged legal opinion to the town board saying it did not, but I was wondering if you could just talk about that for a minute to the public. I know you've spoken about it before, but if you could just do it again.
Sure, I think there were actually a couple of memos now on this, and one memo addressed whether there would be the ability of a property owner to essentially come in and say, I'd like a zone change too for my property, because you granted one for this applicant. And the answer is anyone can ask, but the board under longstanding New York law has nearly absolute discretion with respect to deciding questions like that. Should the board even take up the question, you're not obligated to even give that request a public hearing or time at a public meeting. It's totally your prerogative.
And if we didn't do that and then the town was sued,
I hate to answer
I
hypothetical
know.
questions like that, but I can tell you that under New York law, the legislative body has tremendous latitude and discretion as to zoning. Now, whether to entertain a zone change request, where the line is drawn. I mean, this is really, the line has to be drawn somewhere, and you're going through that exercise with this application. Courts are not going to second guess your judgment on that. So that's zoning, and we dealt with that I think some time ago, and probably not, this wasn't the first application where we had the occasion to talk to the board about that. And the second thing that we've looked about as well, alright, so 4 stories have been allowed on this property. Could somebody across the street or down the block say, well, they got 4 stories, I'd like a variance. I'd like to go up 4 stories too, or 3 stories. So if you said yes to them, say yes to me. And that request goes to the zoning board of appeals. And there, again, the zoning board has very broad discretion. It's a different test, it's a balancing test. But they've got broad discretion, and that's a big ask. And the town board has taken a lot of time to deal with zoning on North Greeley generally, and this particular zone change. And if you adopt the adopt the legislation, you'll have made a determination as to height. And a pretty significant determination just in terms of the magnitude of going from 2 stories to 4. So, I think that the ability of another property owner to get a variance on that basis alone is slim to none.
And if it's in the record that one of the reasons that would potentially be granted is because there was 12 or 20% affordable housing, that would then add to that equation as well, correct?
Correct, and so would all the other benefits that I think the board has talked about with this particular project in terms of the energy standards. That it's a model, it's conceived as a model project in terms of attaining energy standards that are above and beyond anything that the town code would require today for any other project.
So Ed, would the zoning board of appeals have to look at these other factors that we would take into account in granting the special permit? For instance, the carbon neutral aspects and all of the other special features of the project.
No, it's a different.
What would be their obligation?
It's a different type of test, it's balancing and looking at for example, the magnitude of the variance, and again, we're talking hypothetical, but if somebody wanted an additional story, if they were in the BRP district where 2 stories is the max and they asked for a 3rd or a 4th, that's a very significant variance. So that out of the box makes it a very, and it's also running against what a determination that the legislative body has made. I mean, you're essentially looking at the North Greeley corridor, and you've had this discussion. You're entertaining this particular application, but you haven't rezoned the entire downtown for 4 stories or 5 stories, or you're just dealing in a very deliberate incremental way with this particular application. So for a property owner to come in and say one project changes everything, it just doesn't.
Well, an application to the ZBA would also be incremental, and I'm still trying to figure out what would prevent them from approving an application like this.
And someone could ask for that variance now if they wanted to, correct?
Let me just say that, the idea is that we would have passed this legislation. So it would be very different applying for that now as opposed to after we've approved 50 North Greeley.
Well,
So we're
also
talking
4
about
stories.
something completely different
Look,
on North Greeley.
yeah, but I would still submit that, one project does not change community character. One project, in terms of this particular issue and in terms of what the ZBA would have to look at, it doesn't change a neighborhood. Maybe one thing if everything except a single property maybe was 4 stories, and there was one that for whatever reason, I mean that it really would need to be more than what we have on the table now, where it's just one property. It's not gonna give, in my view, a property owner the ability to say, grant me a variance simply because it was granted here.
Okay, any questions?
Yeah, I guess I would say I'm still not clear about that. I'm just not hearing what it is that would prevent that from happening. other than it's unlikely.
I think when you
And it would be incremental, by definition, it would be one application to the ZBA.
yeah, I
So, but maybe that's, you know, a subject for further discussion.
we have my memo on it. You know, again, I think in terms of the magnitude of the request and the type of request, the fact that that type of request, as far as we know, is, you know, unprecedented in terms of an additional story or two as an area variance in Newcastle. I think, again, it is extraordinarily unlikely that that would get very far with the ZBA.
We also appoint the members of the ZBA, so we wanna make sure whoever we appoint, and we have some vacancies
But that's
now,
not how you control something like that.
are thoughtful.
Yeah, but the ZBA is independent, so now you're saying that we're gonna appoint people based on what they think.
No,
I don't think that's
I'm saying you appoint
appropriate.
people who are thoughtful.
Can you talk to the standards of the ZBA?
Okay, thank you. All right, so why don't we hear from the applicant
No,
and then our traffic person?
it's up to you, but I think that
Okay, let's hear from traffic first.
I went already, unless you want me to do it again.
It's okay.
Again, Star Kip with Creighton Manning, the traffic consultant for the town. I know it's late, so I'll try and kind of keep this a little brief. We did, so we were contracted to conduct a review of the applicant's traffic and parking materials. We did conduct that review. We provided a letter dated July 21st. In that review, we noted that there were some, the site plans that we had obtained were from a previous date. Those were obviously based on the discussions earlier in flux. We provided some feedback on what, you know, could be looked at as good for this type of development to help it be better. Those included bike racks, charging stations for electric vehicles. We talked about parking demarcated for residents. That actually came to be some of a solution possibly. And also like a loading area for the commercial components or for residents moving in and out. Talking about the use, I think it's important to highlight, as AQRF did, validate their statement that this is a transit-oriented development, residential mixed use, very close to a train station. And I'll go into some of the comments that we had. Essentially what AKRF did was Killinghorn conducted a study of the hamlet back in 2019, and the way that AKRF proceeded with their analysis was they collected up-to-date traffic volume data for the King Street and Greeley Avenue intersection, as well as traffic volumes along Greeley to validate the data collected in 2019. Based on the data that they collected, the traffic has trended in the way that the Killinghorn study projected, and showed that there wasn't much of a fluctuation in traffic volumes from 2019 to now. The reason that's important to note is that Killinghorn conducted a level of service analysis of various intersections within the hamlet, including King Street and Greeley. That level of service analysis found that the intersection operates favorably with acceptable levels of service. It was going to operate favorably in the future with the build out of the hamlet. And so this project, I think it's important as we talk about seeker, the impact of this project as shown in AKRF's analysis, which we validated from the trip generation numbers for what was currently, when we reviewed it, was 42 units, a little over 3,000 feet of restaurant use and a little over 3,000 square feet of retail use, that the project would not have a significant impact on traffic operations at King Street and Greeley. I think it's important to note that there are projected level of service constraints possibly at Woodburn and King and at the Quaker and King Street intersections, Quaker and Greeley street intersections. But those were projected on the build out of the hamlet. So again, this one project is not going to have a significant impact, but the build out of the hamlet will predict by Killinghorn have an impact on those intersections. we'll just hit on parking. The KRF conducted a very thorough actual parking analysis of the hamlet. They looked at a 5-minute and 10-minute walk. Just within the 5-minute walk of the subject site, there is ample parking. I think the applicant, based on the discussions earlier, there's the option to push all of the commercial parking onto the onto the off-site parking. Given the utilization numbers that they found, there is a surplus of parking that could be used for those retail spaces. Going back to the Kimley Horn study, when we talk about like that study validating or being validated by this study conducted by AKRF, when they projected the number of trips generated by, they broke the hamlet out into blocks. When they did that, this was in a block, I think it was block 4. They had similar trip generation numbers for this area. So again, that kind of validates the Kimley Horn study that was conducted. I think apart from that, I think the summary is that this one project is not going to have a significant impact. We agree with the findings of AKRF. I think if you want to dot your I's and cross your T's, you can have them update their trip generation study and their analysis. Apart from that, I can answer any questions that you guys have regarding our midnight.
Just a comment and a question, maybe to Ed. And not to make you feel bad or anything, but the Kimley Horn study was declared inadequate and insufficient by this board. And so I would hesitate to make that a part of an official report. I mean, where do we stand with that, right? Because that's what happened, and so you have someone in good faith here
We spent a lot of time on that resolution.
citing that, yeah, so what's the impact of that on a subsequent study?
It's been a while since I looked at it too, but my recollection is that the distinction we made then was to not criticize the underlying data collection, which is what I think is being relied on here.
The
but
data collection by
Kimley
the
Horn
town,
and the
by
town,
Kimley, okay.
right, and not just the store.
So WSP was the original traffic consultant that did the original analysis of traffic in the hamlet. And they identified the need for the lights and everything that you see out there today, as well as future projections. Kimley Horn's traffic engineer updated WSP's analysis based on with new data. So the traffic counts, the turning movements, all of that data is what Creighton Manning used in relation to AKRF's updated numbers. So the data, as Ed was saying, is still very relevant. He's not using any conclusions that were drawn as part of the form-based code discussions, but he's using the data, very much like the stormwater information.
It's essentially the WSP raw
Yes.
data being used.
Repeatedly and updated.
Okay.
We spent a lot of time crafting that resolution so that underlying data didn't need to be duplicated, but that the analysis of that data we wanted to be redone. We didn't rely on analysis, but we were allowing underlying data to be utilized.
Okay, so I think then what AKRF failed to do in their study was a reanalysis of the study intersections. I think we had provided a recommendation letter to the board that you request a traffic study be done. That was not done. Say professionally, in the King Street and Greeley Avenue intersection does operate favorably based on the Kimley Horn data and their analysis. The addition of this project's trips, which are well below 100 trips in a peak hour, will likely not move the needle into an unfavorable situation, levels of service E and F, which you do see at Woodburn in the build condition, the build out of the hamlet. But again, that's the build out of the entire hamlet, not just this one project.
So in your professional opinion, you're sort of repeating yourself, but I'm gonna make it a little more specific. That initial analysis was for a build out of about 1,000 additional units.
throughout the hamlet,
Yes.
right?
Given that this is maximum 50,
Mhm.
depending on which scenario we choose, do you feel comfortable that it's not going to have a significant impact with regard to traffic? Is that correct?
I do feel comfortable saying that the build out with 8 additional single family units is again not gonna move the needle at that intersection by this one project. I think if you wanted to dot your i's and cross your t's, you could request the applicant provide an updated analysis, just have AKRF update the numbers, update their analysis, and we'll do a secondary review of that.
Any questions from the board? Okay, good. Hang out, cause I
Yeah,
think you might
no,
have
I'm
some
here.
public questions. Alright, did you, the applicant, wanna say anything? You don't have to.
Does anybody want me to explain it again? Did anybody miss it earlier?
Good.
Alright.
Alright, so we're now gonna open this up to public comment. So just before we get there, there are cards, I believe, that were handed out and there may be some back there still. If you do wanna speak, please fill out a card and hand it to Christina over here. For those of you who are on Zoom, we're going to take the people who are here in public first and then we will move on to Zoom. And again, I know we are late in the evening, so I wanna thank everybody for coming out and sticking with us. Alright, so first we have Lynn Lambert.
Hi, everyone. I wanna say about the traffic thing that I'm sure the volume of traffic from, 50 units wouldn't be much, but I do wanna mention that that's such a skinny street that cars can barely go 2 ways down that street. I know I got doored on that street many years ago and I'm not sure how deliveries are gonna make it through there. So it's not traffic per se, but it's certainly traffic flow. It's very hard to comment when so many things are up in the air right now. A lot of important decisions are up in the air. But so forgive me if a couple of things are wrong because I was thinking about this based on what I last understood to be the project. So here's my letter that I'm gonna submit after. Dear Town Board, Architecture Board, and Planning Board. Architecture Board, do you agree with me that this proposed building doesn't fit with any other building designed downtown or the entire area? It's like 3 spaceships landed next to and across the street from vintage design buildings, except for the Verizon building, which is also an eyesore. No matter if you personally like this modern design, can you convince anyone that it fits with the character of the neighborhood? Isn't determining whether a design fits into a spot one of the prime responsibilities of your board? I was pleased to see that the SECRA questions, that one of them has to do with fitting with community character. And that is one of the things that I have found very offensive about this project. And the other is aesthetic, which I think you can like this building, but you don't have to enjoy that thought of it being in this spot in our vintage town. It's just a different thing. In White Plains and Harrison, I would have no problem with it. There are a lot of places where it would fit, but it just doesn't fit here. So my thought is, again, what's gonna happen with the affordable? This, as I understood it, is not diverse housing. The truth is that by far and away, the majority of these apartments will be luxury rentals priced at $5,000 to $6,000 a month, or perhaps even more. Whoever called this diverse housing is a spin doctor, and I'm not buying it. The number and size of apartments keeps changing, but if studio apartments are indeed added back in, I understand that none of these apartments, whether affordable or not, and whether inhabited by 1 or 2 people, will be granted even a single parking space. What does that practically mean? It means that all of those residents would have to order in their groceries, which gets expensive, or try to book the couple of electric cars on premises, or take the bus in all kinds of weather. But The residents also must be able to get to work, their doctors and dentists, and any recreation by train or by a car service. Again, that's expensive. At this point, as the residents count just went up to 50, so it's hard to know exactly what's being proposed. How many are to be both affordable or workforce housing, and how many 1 or 2 bedroom sizes where kids need transportation to anything after school that's needed? We don't know because these numbers keep being shuffled around. Do you have any doubt that the studio residents would immediately become competitors for every available parking spot now being utilized by patrons of the area stores and offices and restaurants? They will, because you need at least one car to function here. We're just setting up a parking nightmare for all of the residents who actually frequent the retailers we profess to be trying to support. How many times are you willing to circle the block in order to find a legal space? How good is that for the environment? And if the developers are able to attract the diner and retail which residents say they'd like to see, parking in the area will only get worse. Why would we allow so many concessions under our zoning and ignore the number one goal of our 2017 master plan, which says that all development must be in a scale and density of what already exists in a neighborhood in order to allow this massive structure in our tiny town? Developing an appropriate size apartment building which visually harmonizes with the other buildings in our town makes sense. Using green materials for that would also make sense. But green materials don't have to be used only in this style of design, do they? Having a truly diverse mix of options that many residents of our town could afford to rent would be wonderful. People of various income levels, workforce employees, disabled, singles, empty nesters, families with kids, young and old, that would add diverse housing. This proposed structure just doesn't succeed on any level. It would be a permanent, oversized eyesore that you, our town board, and our architectural board would have to answer for. Please don't approve it. Our planning board has been pretty clear that they're not fans of this structure for many reasons that they have expressed. This entire mission is to protect the town, their entire mission is to protect the town from inappropriate and just plain wrong development. They have been speaking out and sounding the alarm. Can they be heard over the insistent wails of the owner and developer who insist that they have proposed a project that they were asked to produce? Really? They couldn't look around and see the character of the neighborhood? That would dictate that something more fitting would be appropriate? Did anyone ask them to ignore the character of the neighborhood and then have at it? Why not listen to the planning board, which has been trying to do their job? I'm not cynical enough to think that any of our town board members are beholden to local property owners or developers for anything. Who you do owe your loyalty and best work for are obviously your constituents. If this development is built with its massive street wall, completely dwarfing everything around it, are you going to explain to those constituents that the reason you approved it is that you were promised a diner, even though the town has absolutely no control over what goes in on the ground floor at all? It could be occupied by professional offices, not a diner. That is the reality. Are you going to defend this as diverse housing or a structure that both fits and belongs in this neighborhood? I don't think either of those would fly. I hope you don't do that. Instead of tweaking this building proposal, I hope you'll send a message that has been pointed out repeatedly by the planning board. We need structures which fit both the need to maintain neighborhood and hamlet character while also adding housing, and also which would have adequate on-site parking for those tenants without taking the limited street parking from our local retailers and residents. Other towns do this every day. It's far from impossible, but may well be with this proposed structure as the starting point. As has been stated by many people, I am surprised that this proposal has gotten this far, With the many valid concerns which have been raised, it seems to me it's time to ask the owner and developer for real alternative proposals which address these concerns in both scope and look. If we are stuck with this basic structure, the ability to have an apartment building that fits here in any way is severely compromised. Moving forward with this would create a permanent out-of-character building for future generations to regret. Close your eyes, open them. Look at this structure. Where are you? In White Plains or Harrison? Not Chappaqua, I would venture. Again, even if you like the look of it on its own, it would not be alone. It will be on the main street of our tiny little hamlet, surrounded by mostly vintage structures. It would stand out like a sore thumb. I believe we need rental units here, but not at the cost of impinging so completely on our small town vibe, which so many of us love and appreciate. We can have both if we insist the design be respectful of our town's character. Please protect us for future generations, respectfully. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Before we move on, I just wanted to remind everyone of two things. First, that we are gonna be kind to everybody and not disparage anyone, whether it's anyone on the board or the applicant or residents at all. Not that you didn't do that, I'm just putting that out there. And also, when I was first elected 10 years ago, we put a stop to the 3-minute rule because I didn't think it was appropriate. If you have 4 minutes worth of things to say, you should be able to say that. But if everyone can just be respectful that it's almost 10 o'clock and of our time. So thank you. All right, Maggie.
Okay, my name's Margaret Ferguson. I have 4 points. I'll try to move through.
Too. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you say your address as well?
7 Bridges Road.
Thank you.
4 points, I'll try to move through them quickly. The first one's on the Kimley Horn reference. I'm looking at the report right now. I'm not buying the reference that it's data and not a study. The Kimley Horn study conducted a level of service analysis, and it says analysis again. When prompted, this fellow changed the word analysis to data tonight, but that's relying on an analysis. That was abandoned by this town board and it's inappropriate. The next point is that what will increase the likelihood that somebody else will try to come in and build bigger, denser, and more parking deficient is that this special permit law does 2 things. One is, as I keep saying, it does an end run around the comp plan. It sets new standards on density, height, and parking. That can be used by another applicant to say, because it says that this in 14A, the scale, massing, and character of an NG0 building shall be consistent with the goals of the comprehensive plan relative to the area where the project is being built. I think I don't have it exact, so I scribbled it down. But it's basically saying that if you build in according with the special permit, that is consistent with goals of the comp plan. It is an end run around our 2017 comp plan. So therefore, another applicant could go to the ZBA and say, look what this law says. It says this 55-foot peaked building with a density of 50 to 59 apartments per acre with 1 parking space per apartment is consistent with the comp plan. That's what they're gonna argue. Also under New York State Town Law 274B1, the courts have repeatedly held that the inclusion of the permitted use in the ordinance as a special use permit is tantamount to a legislative finding that the permitted use is in harmony with the general zoning plan and will not adversely affect the neighborhood. So you're gonna have 2 changes that an applicant can go to the ZBA, a separate legislative body that's entitled to make its own decisions.
Not legislative.
I'm sorry, a separate determining body, I mean, makes its own decisions, that's what I meant. They'll argue just what I said. You have a law that's now saying the height, the density, the parking deficiency are all okay. That's what it says, all in line with the comp plan, even though they're not, but that's what the law says. And the building built there doesn't adversely affect the neighborhood. In fact, it's in harmony with the general zoning plan. Those are the arguments they're gonna make to a zoning board of appeals. which has to look at the impact on the neighborhood and whether to grant a variance on any of those things. So if you have the Susan Lawrence building, or you have the Maxine's lot, they're both on the west side. One's bigger than 50 North Greeley, one's smaller. What if they both say, I wanna go not as big, I wanna go somewhat less, but I still wanna go bigger than current zoning? How can I adversely affect the neighborhood if the one at 50 North Greeley isn't? How am I not in harmony with the general zoning plan if the one at 50 North Greeley isn't? Those are the arguments that are gonna be made. And we know that if there's a loophole, developers will find it and they'll push for it. So it's a significant increased risk that this is gonna expose that area to further development, not expanding the zoning district, but through the ZBA. So that's my second point. The third point, if there's anything that showed how arbitrary your parking decisions have been through this whole thing, was tonight's discussion. We've been hearing that you can deviate from the, I forget the name of the industry manual, the UTE or whatever, ITE, okay. It's 1.1 for one apartment, 1.4 for one bedroom, 1.1, 1.4 for two bedroom, because there's shared parking. That's what we've been hearing. Well, it was 4 spaces of shared parking, and now I think it's down to 1, I think, depending on how many apartments you put in there. Now, first of all, I think everybody has to have a parking space. It's been said repeatedly that it's unreasonable to think they won't have 1 car. You cannot live here unless you're just basically unable to drive without a car. It's just not feasible in this area. But we've been told repeatedly that the shared parking is supposed to compensate for a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom that has 2 adults. If they need the second car, they'll use the shared parking. Well, it's gone from 4 to 1 if we're going to 50 apartments. And there's no parking spaces for visitors. Conifer has parking spaces for visitors, and I think it has a greater ratio of parking than 1. But it's got more spaces for the residents there than you're talking about for this building. And already some cars are parked from Conifer overnight in the lots in the area on the street. So this discussion, I don't know where you're going with it. It's all over the place on parking. Either you mean it or you don't. Either shared parking is supposedly gonna solve things or it's not, but it's just really as about confusing and hard to process as any conversation you've had in this whole thing. Then the final point is, I don't know if you're talking about making a decision soon. Is it 42 apartments, 50 apartments? I don't know. But, you know, the town has to understand what your goal is here. Where are you going? And tell them. I mean, this proposal comes in within the past week and people are supposed to process a 17% increase in density in that building. I think that's what it is. 8 more apartments, a 17% increase in density. It's 59 residences an acre. That's a lot. And that's supposed to be something like, oh, okay, yeah. Now, I welcome everybody in this town. I think that the price of these apartments is insanely high. It's not gonna help our community, it's not gonna diversify housing. So I'm not saying anything about keeping people in the middle incomes and lower incomes out. But I'm just saying the process is askew. The process is confusing to residents. The process is back and forth. I am sympathetic to the developer that the process has been all over the place, but for the community it's also all over the place. It is extremely hard to follow what's going on, and I'm very detail oriented. I think you all know that. But it is hard to process what's being said, what you're thinking, where we're going, what to comment on, and how to make your point as a community member is really stressful and difficult. And with this change, I almost don't know what to make of it. I mean, when I saw that there were no apartments for the people who were in the lower incomes, I really was offended. When it got to no parking spaces for the people in the studio apartments, I was offended. With Chappaqua Crossing, I do remember a planning board member expressly saying on the Kukulu building, there should be no corridor. There should be no stigma attached to the workforce or the affordable housing, the AFFH apartments. And she referred to it as a corridor. Because there was some talk about having a separate elevator at one point. She said, no, you have to.
We all said that.
This was the planning board I'm talking about, okay? I'm remembering this discussion from the planning board. And she said, no, that's the way it had to be, but the same here. I mean, you can't not give, because you're adding affordable apartments, and by the way, it's not 20% legally defined affordable apartments. It's still 12% of the AFFH apartments, not 20%. You're adding workforce housing, but some of those people are not gonna have a parking spaces because or may not is offensive. And it really should not be the way the town goes. And I think that's it for tonight, but I ask for some sort of semblance of clarity about what the plan is at any given moment and where we're going with this, or to explain to the town the changes in a very concise way, not putting things in the packet, not having things put online that, like the fire department letter was put online today, and it was from last month,
I received that yesterday.
it's not you, Christine, I'm just saying I see it's dated June 23rd, but I didn't know about it till I saw it today. And by the way, they say their recommendation is not to have parking, on the west side of Greeley. So are we gonna lose those spaces or not? Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. All right, I see some hands raised online. Rob Fleischer. And again, anyone in person, if you wanna talk, please fill out a card. If you wanna talk, please fill out a card. Rob?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Rob Fleischer, Oak Hill Road, Newcastle. Just a couple points and clarifications. So affordables on the 42, a unit option was 3 2-bedrooms and 3 1-bedrooms, is that correct?
It was 3 1-bedrooms, 2 2-bedrooms, and 5 studios. Oh, the original plan?
No, on the old, was 3 and 3.
I don't think we ever specified.
Well, it would have to be not a studio, given that there weren't any.
It was 5 affordable.
Right, so it was 3 and 3, they weren't all 1-bedrooms, they were 3 and 3.
It wasn't defined, it was 5 affordable and 1 workforce.
It was never defined, he's saying.
What was the bedroom count on it?
Right.
It wasn't defined because it's 5 affordable and 1 workforce. We just never dug into it then, but it would have been somewhere in the mix. We just never.
Okay, Rob, any comment?
I thought it was gonna be 3 and 3. So then the new one would be, if I understood the new proposal, you'd only be losing either 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom and getting 4 additional apartments. The apartments that I think Jeremy mentioned earlier, I think those are under the OPWDD, the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. I believe there are 3 at Reader's Digest. And if there's any way to make any of these affordable units classified for that, I think it'd be fantastic. Because there's certainly a lot of families in town that have children and have people in their family like that, children, adults, whatever. I think the car share was always one of the very interesting aspects of this proposal. And I would kinda hate to lose any car share spots. I'm not sure where they would go, if maybe we're not losing them, but the 4 car share spots I thought were a really important aspect that I took some comfort from. And then in terms of the pricing of these, and what people say that they're gonna be, they're gonna do whatever the market will bear. And anybody who thinks they know exactly what the market's gonna do when this is done, I don't think people are gonna know. There's no way in the world, and they shouldn't, that the developer is gonna rent them out for the most money they can. But that's what people do when they own property. So even if they shrink it by 15-20%, I don't know if that, I wouldn't think that's a 15 to 20% rent decrease. It'll be what the market tells it's gonna be. And then lastly, on the precedent, the ZBA has never given a variance that I'm aware of for something like this. Conifer was done by the town board, they gave that permit. The ZBA may have given some smaller variances, but the main permit was given by the town board. So I don't know if that makes a difference in terms of precedence, but I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Naveen Arjun. If you could just say your address too.
I live at 73 Pheasant Run in Millwood. Today I'm going to attempt to shut down a few of the arguments against multi-story housing. And two arguments which really stood out to me were the lack of parking and the destruction of the town's charm or atmosphere. We build buildings not to make the town look nice, but to serve a function. In this case, the developer wants to create a large residential building in a town that doesn't have much lower income housing. The excuse it looks out of place or it ruins the vibe of the town or it looks like a sore thumb is not really a valid argument, since if more of these are built by, it stops sticking out so much, and if it doesn't and if more buildings aren't built nearby, it could become kind of like a landmark for the town, and it just isn't really something that should be considered when you're building something like this. It's a building, not a park. We don't need the building to look pretty, although I'm sure we all do. The primary focus of the site should be to house as many people as possible. And this town has schools rated in the top 200 in the nation, but by not allowing poor families to move here, we are denying hundreds of people a chance to escape poverty in worse off areas with crime and abuse. We have clean parks and safe streets and you're using the excuse that it won't look as pretty as you like. It's not really an argument, but more of a gripe that you all won't seem to let up. And for parking, as far as I can tell, right now it's not much of a problem. I've asked my parents, who also don't think it's a problem right now. But if it is to you, it's a problem not because of dense housing complex, but of existing suburban sprawl. If we increase the density of houses and shops in an area rather than making car parks, you won't even need a car to live or move around inside of Chappaqua because of the proximity of the Metro North station, leaving more and more space for things such as the supermarket, something that Chappaqua is currently lacking, would benefit the town in many ways. Visitors should not be driving into the town. If they live in the city, they can take the Metro North. If they live in Millwood, they can bike over the way I do. You shouldn't be driving inside a town or through a town anyway. You should be walking, unless you consider Houston a good city to live in. And parking doesn't seem like it would be an issue even after the building is built, because the new building is being planned with parking lots on site or off site. So there really isn't a reason to be using parking as an argument either. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, James Driscoll. Then we're gonna come to some of you online.
How's everybody tonight? I just wanted to counter argument what the gentleman just said. Appreciate his opinion and everything, but time and time again, I keep hearing everybody think that the developer's building a project that's designed to house massive amounts of people with small apartments. It's not. He's building 1,000 to 2,000 square foot apartments with sprinkler studios that are gonna rent at the bare minimum at $3,000 a month. So it's not diversified housing for poor people, it's not any of that. I don't know why people seem to keep thinking that. The closest building I can think of is the Atwood in Pleasantville, and they rent for $3,000 to $5,000 a month. So I'm curious why this keeps coming up. Another thing is parking is a major consideration. 14% is the number of people in Westchester County that do not have a car. 14%. So even areas such as New Rochelle, Yonkers, and White Plains, it's 16%. So to think that whoever's gonna move up here is not gonna have a car is preposterous, I think. Especially since the majority of people in Westchester have 2 cars per household. So, yeah, we have a train line, but it's a commuter train line. You know, you can't take the train to the supermarket if you live in that building. You know, if you go to Grand Central, you got no problem. What are you gonna do? Take the train to Pleasantville? I mean, this is just time and time again, people act like we're we are building a building that's out of character, VSP. That's all I gotta say.
Alright, thank you. Now let's move to, I need new glasses, Cassiopeia Sand? Online?
Hi, I'd like to start. Oh, yeah, hi, I'm online.
Can we just get your address?
Connection is very bad, so
Cassiopeia, can we just get, we need your address.
Yeah, 25 Longview Lane.
Perfect, thank you. And you're breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, 25 Longview Lane.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, if you can't hear me, that's because of my connection.
You're good right now.
Yeah, my connection is very bad. Okay, so I just like to open by talking about some of the arguments that are brought up here tonight. When some of the people against, I don't know, some of the people speaking about the character of our town or whatever said that we have to think about future generations. My comrade Naveed speaking tonight. And we represent a much larger movement that shows that, people in Chapua do want multifamily homes. And as to the people who say that this is not an affordable housing development, we know it's not an affordable housing development. And we are taking the position that the development as it is unsatisfactory, but we need to push the developer into adopting an affordable housing model. So my speech is focused on the fact that in this argument about 50 North Greeley Avenue, what we're mostly hearing is arguments that are for or against the building. And what we should really be talking about are the contents of the building. 50 North Greeley Avenue, as it is right now, is largely the town of Newcastle is granting the developer an exempt code, and we support this exception. The best part of it is that it gives the town of Newcastle a lot of leverage. If the developer wants this exception, they'll need to play by our rules. And this has been shown by our public hearing tonight. The zero emissions requirement for this development shows that the town of Newcastle has already laid out certain conditions that the developer has to follow in exchange for the zoning exception. So in this case, it's that the development has to be carbon neutral. And that's awesome, and it shows that Newcastle is more than capable of creating conditions that are a part of the zoning exception. And this is why we can and this is why we should mandate that 50 North Greeley Avenue becomes an affordable development. We should mandate that a majority or a totality of the units are affordable units. We should say, yes, go ahead and build that 4-story apartment complex, but it has to be affordable. The increase from it, but if we had more, significantly more, my group would support the development unequivocally. Listen, as a town, we have a real opportunity to create progress here. If we let 50 North really get built as it is right now, we miss out on that progress. If we stop 50 North really from being built altogether, we also miss out on that progress. So in order to make our town more diverse, equitable, and inclusive, we must turn 50 North Greeley Avenue into an affordable housing development and then let it be built. I truly hope that it's welcoming.
Oh, we just lost you.
Oh,
No, you were muted for a second. You're back.
Alright. Okay.
We just missed like the last few words.
Okay, so I was saying that
You said let it be built. Your service is terrible. We can't hear you at all.
Let 50 North Greeley. Yeah, it missed out on a chance to create. If we let, okay,
No, we got all that. Your cell
Sorry, can you hear me
service.
right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe, are you going to submit this
Okay,
to
I'm
the-
gonna
Do you
type
wanna
it up.
send, is this written up? Do you wanna send this into the board?
That might be very helpful.
Yes, I'll do that right now, thank you.
Okay, perfect.
so
Thank
much.
you so much. All right, Robert Lewis.
Hi, so I really, I see that the applicant has done a lot of work, a lot of iterations, fine tuning parking counts and the room counts, a lot of iterations, but I wonder, has the town board done, really investigated alternative design ideas, things like height and massing for the site, the orientation, the kinds of things that Tom Curley, where he looked at, explored the streetscape. I think, I know that he made a presentation to the planning board, where he talked a little bit about the downtown, the Hamlet, some of the Hamlet studies. He was terribly concerned about activity on North Greeley. Do you know, have you looked at alternatives for the streetscape?
Bob, I think we've all seen Tom's iterations, and certainly I think most, if not all of us, have spoken to him. He's been on our work group sessions, our working group as well, so we've definitely been fully aware of those options.
So is that something that has been part of these hearings?
Yes, they've been in our work session, they've been in our work sessions. He hasn't spoken at a public hearing, but we've certainly looked at the planning board meetings. They've sent us memos, and Tom and Eldad, both from the planning board, are in the working group for this proposal.
Okay, because it does seem like it's very relevant to really a consideration of the health of North Greeley.
As are, by the way, two members of our architectural review board are also Stanley and Bob are
Yes,
are in that working group as well.
One of the things that one of the ideas that I had for North Greeley was, and it's not specifically this project, but when I go up North Greeley, I frequently end up having to, on my way home, drive up Maple Avenue, which is the street at the north end of Greeley at the post office. And it's a somewhat uncomfortable drive going up the incline and then having to try to get onto King Street at the top of the hill. The traffic coming around the turn on King Street is a little dangerous. Coming off of a stop on an incline. I'm just wondering, I'd much rather, I don't know if other people have the same problem. Perhaps the traffic engineer would have a comment about this, whether there would be some way to provide a turnaround on North Greeley so that traffic could use North Greeley to actually circulate, go north and southbound on North Greeley without having to, if the traffic on that street got a little bit greater, particularly if we didn't have the parking lot there to turn around, is that something that might be available in the future?
You want a turnaround right where Chestnut Oaks entrance is?
Well, I'm just imagining, that if there were, I suppose it would take a roundabout or a cul-de-sac or something, some sort of an enlarged turnaround to accomplish that, but the street as it is doesn't really permit a simple turnaround. And so I just end up having to drive up that hill and deal with the traffic at the intersection of Maple and King Street. And it really isn't ideal. But I've been doing that for 25 years, so I guess I can continue. But if the traffic is going to increase on that street, maybe it's something that could be considered.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else here in person who'd like to speak?
Yes.
No, yeah, it was in person, but yes, your turn. Who is calling? You can speak. Unmute yourself. Okay, is there anyone online who would like to speak?
I am unmuted.
Thank you. Can you please state your name and address?
Ellen Shotford, Bedford Road.
Hi, Ellen.
In looking at the legislation, on page 3, number 7D, you were indicating the possibility of waiving underground. The fire department letter, which arrived today, states that they need the wires underground for safety and for not to be waived. So therefore, the town board needs to look at alternatives. One, move to the east side of the street, all the wires with the developer's expense. 2, decrease the height of the building. 3, a totally different design. Also, the fire department needs parking only on the east side of the street. How does that change the shortfall of spaces? Other merchants need parking for their businesses. If I'm correct, it would lose 10 spaces on the west side of the street, and therefore your parking counts would be all off. So please, for the fire department's safety, make sure that their needs are met. I don't know if anyone picked up the information this week, but there was a problem at the Botanical Hills School with a fire on the roof. And it turned out that one of their solar panels had an isolated electrical component on fire. So therefore, as much as we want all these great things, sometimes they don't always work the way we expect them to. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you. All right, is there anyone else online who would like to speak?
No other hands are raised.
Thank you. Anyone else here in person? Come on up.
For the benefit of the public and
You can raise that.
sorry, yeah. I just wanna understand, and maybe this is a conversation I can have with Sabrina about just the Kimley Horn study. I think I would like to get to the bottom of that and see, so we can confirm the statements made by the public and so we'll if that's okay, I just wanna make sure that was
No,
said.
absolutely.
Alright.
Not to put you on the spot, but Bob, did you have any thoughts as a member of our architecture review board? I did totally put you on the spot, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, there's been a bunch of interesting comments from the public. One of them that's interesting is, is the building gonna stand out or is it gonna fit in with the community? So I do think that it will stand out. It is a different building, its scale and architecture is different. It doesn't mean that it's bad or inappropriate or isn't gonna be a nice addition to the community. So, while in the residential communities and residential areas, we certainly focus a lot to make sure that something's not too different, that it might be offensive to the character of some of the houses, but I don't know that that's as applicable. I personally don't in the commercial area, so I just wanted to mention that. And the one comment I do have, or a question for discussion, is I did look at this, first time I looked at it today, the draft for the proposed special permit law. And I've mentioned this in the workshops. I do have some concerns that by approving a rezoning through this form, does that really assure what protection does the town have that you're gonna get the architecture and the building of what we've been shown? Because I happen to think it's a nice piece of architecture and I would support it. And I would support other aspects of the project. But I'm not convinced by reading this that somebody who wanted to give a less appealing building couldn't check the boxes on this list and fit within the confines of the legislation. So that's my one concern.
Great, thank you. All right, any other comments? You're back.
I would like to finish what my friend Cassio Bassand was saying. If we let 50 North Greeley get built as it is right now, we miss out on that progress. If we stop 50 North Greeley from being built, we also miss out on that progress. In order to make our town more diverse, equitable, and inclusive, we must turn 50 North Greeley Avenue into an affordable housing development and then let it be built. I truly hope that we will make this first step down a path towards Chappaqua that is a more welcoming and supportive of all.
Thank you.
Can I talk for a minute?
Sure.
I wanna thank everybody, the town board, everybody from the town for being here, everybody from the public for coming. I'd like to educate you young people a little bit, and everybody else in town a little bit. Owning real estate comes with the ability to do things. It does not allow people to strictly dictate what can be built on a site. It does allow input, that's why we have these public sessions. The site currently is retail. It can continue to be retail. Walgreens is no longer the tenant, Walgreens has left the building. In the near future, if we do not come to a conclusion here, the Feinberg family will have to lease that building because financially they need to. I am just the poor developer here to help. We've been doing this for quite a while and we are all working to get somewhere, hopefully. That's why we all keep coming to these meetings. That being said, there are certain things that can and cannot be done. If the building was all affordable, nobody could build it. It financially would not make sense. There's a cost to build a building, to build it all affordable, it could not be built today. The building that was built all affordable in town was built under different circumstances with tax incentives, etc. This building could not be built all affordable, it was owned by a private entity. So just so we can end that conversation, will never be a fully affordable building. There are certain things to make this project work, there are certain things that don't make it work. We've been playing this game of push and pull, we're here to try to work to figure something out. If we can't figure it out, it's not gonna be a two-story building. It will stay as retail. We have been trying really hard to figure out something to work. So I hope everybody understands we continue to try. We have been working in every different parameter to get there and we hope we will get there. But it's not as though if it's not this or that, or it's 42 units, it's 50 units, it's 4 stories, it's gonna be some iteration of this, or it's going to be retail as it is today. And that's not a threat, we're not saying this, we're saying because we're trying to figure out a solution, but the alternative is its existing condition, which we hope it isn't, because we don't think that's the best use for the site. It's asphalt and single story retail, that's not good for the world moving forward. So we're here, we're willing, we're able, and just know it's privately held real estate that we'd like to develop, so.
I have a question for you. A gentleman who spoke a while back online, Robert, I forget his last name, he was asking us whether we've asked you for a redesign. And, you know, he was right to ask that, and in fact, to be fully transparent, we haven't. The board has not asked you for a redesign of your model. And I'm
We've redesigned
mindful,
it 10 times.
but I'm mindful of what people have been saying about the the style of architecture. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate everything you've done thus far and rejiggering things and adding and subtracting, but I'm talking about architectural style.
Sure.
So what do you what do you think about that? What if, and I'm not at all sure that the majority of the board would want to ask you to do this,
No,
but just
so-
hypothetically,
so
is that-
in the
I
work-
actually did ask him to do that.
I've been asked this several
Oh, I
times.
didn't know, well, but it's, yeah, I'm curious about that because
We've
we
been
can
asked
have
this
a win-win
several
situation.
times. And we actually sat in the working group sessions and we went through Tom Gurley's plans. And there's constraints of this site. You have a train line behind you, so there's a buffer zone. You can't open windows up against the train line. The site tapers, so if you look at our design, which we can pull back up, I can take the time and show everybody why it's designed the way it is, why there's only windows facing Greeley, why the courtyards are the way they are. I spent the time with Tom going through his designs in multiple different workshops. Also, a lot of his comments, which some of the end results were just to take our building and make it so it couldn't be built. And our architects spent a lot of time going through that with him as well of the redesigns. So we can redesign aesthetically, make it a different color. Again, this is a site plan, it's not gonna necessarily be this color. We haven't gotten that far, we've been here for almost a year and a half going
I
through,
just asked you about colors last week.
yes.
I don't know that it's about color, it's about architectural style. Tom told, and I'm not very familiar with architecture, I know something about it, but Tom has informed us that this is called brutalist architecture. Maybe our architectural board member could expound on that. And it doesn't sound like a very nice thing, but it's a style, and so I'm just curious about
I'm gonna make
what
this one
style
comment again.
of
Tom doesn't own the
architecture.
site. I had this very rough conversation
Right, no,
with Tom.
that's not the point, I'm talking
love
about
to.
architectural styles, so I'm understanding what you're saying about the constraints of the property. I'm just talking about architectural style. While taking account
At
the
architectural
constraints.
styles, we're trying to get to a legislation to get to a building and we can't seem to get there. It is kind of the issue.
Right, I'm addressing the public comments that we've heard,
It's too big,
so,
it's too massive, the street wall we've been addressing is at Tom's request. So
yeah, I'm just talking about architecture at this
I'm
point.
not an
It's not
architect.
brutalist architecture.
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
It's not,
I'm not,
it's more like
we're not,
I'll defer to you, I'm not an architect.
I don't know what it's called, I don't know what it's called, I'm just
I'd say it's
curious
more
about
contemporary.
the style and whether,
Brutalist architecture.
Yeah.
Brutalist architecture tends to be concrete and more raw, so I would not describe this as brutalist
I feel like
architecture.
communist architecture is kind of more brutalist.
Yeah.
It's true, I
I guess the
visited
point
some
is
of it.
to for the building to draw attention to itself and that it features the basic foundations of the building. So again, I'm not that familiar with it, but I'm just wondering about differences in style and whether that can be something that can be changed without changing the function.
Well, you could argue, there's massing and the breaking the scale of a building. And then there's the skin and the dressing up of the building, whether it's glass. If somebody wanted something that was more historical, that fit in more with colonial architecture or some, if you look at some of the other buildings in town, you could put wood siding on it. That might be less offensive to some people who don't like more of the big blockiness of the building. You could dress it in different materials. I mean, there are ways to do it. I think that the materials should fit within the massing and the character of the building, and this is clearly a sculpted building, right? I mean, it's 4 stories, but you've got these big carve-outs on the upper stories for the courtyards, which I think break up the scale of it very nicely. And it's certainly, cut out in a sense, it's a sculpted building, versus a box that's kind of decorated with a certain skin and maybe some architectural jewelry. It's a different technique.
Correct.
But I wouldn't call it brutal. But I do think that
I didn't call it that.
I do think that, somebody making a statement that it's out of character and it's too dissimilar, I think it is to some extent. But I also think it could be a very exciting addition to the downtown area.
Right, I'm not really necessarily asking for, everyone has an opinion about what they think is nice or not nice. So my question goes to whether it is possible to change the architectural style, apart and aside from whether we like it or not. Is
Sure.
it possible to change the architectural style while maintaining the function?
Oh, absolutely, you could have a more traditional boxy, I mean, that's what Tom Curley was aspiring to, he would like to see something more flat facades with a more traditional material on the outside. So yes, you
Right, so
could,
then-
and you're right, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and architectural can be very judgmental, and you know, people have different opinions and views.
Yes, thank you.
But I
So-
think what the issue is and what, after Tom showing his iterations were to what Tom showed and what Tom provided, your parking was an open parking lot at the back of the project. It had 30 some odd units potentially. One of his scenarios had 4 stories, one of them had 3 stories, one of them I think had a 5th story. There were so many different variations, some of them went into the drive lane, there were so many different variations, some of them had windows on the train tracks. So we had multiple iterations before we ended up at this. We had ones that we looked at and said, we don't think this would be the best product to use because you wouldn't have the proper light and air. Trying to figure out light and air and the best layouts on this property is very, very difficult because of the way it tapers, the way it's up against the train tracks, the buffer zones that have been created here, hiding the parking from your line of sight so you don't see it while walking down the street. Those are all things that were taken into consideration and took quite a bit of time before this was presented. So the iterations, we can show you what we did prior to this, which I don't think would be a successful project. We're happy to show that. This took quite a bit of time, which we think will be a good project to be built and a successful project. We can certainly design something that we wouldn't wanna build. We can design a 3-story project that could fit units. The people across the street would not be happy about it. You'd be looking at a flat rubber roof. There are certain things here that we tried to accommodate all of the different aspects and requests from the town, from the neighbors, from meeting with them, from hearing what they wanted. We're never gonna make everybody happy. I learned that a long time ago. I stopped trying. Try to make as many people as we can. And hopefully we'll get there because we're surely running out of time.
I guess my next question would be for the board, for us board members. And unfortunately Ally isn't here, but is another iteration changing the architectural style? Is this something that we want to ask the applicant to do? I don't know if he would do it,
I can tell you I'm not going to, you don't have to.
I don't
but is
need
that
to- I
something
don't
that
want to.
we would want to ask?
I don't know.
I mean, I'm not sure that it would be beneficial at this stage.
Yeah, I just wanna
I agree.
explore all of the options.
think we've
had
have-
comments. Yeah, we've had public comments, so I would like to make sure that we're addressing everyone and everything.
You know, I think that the applicant's been pretty responsive to a lot of these comments. I understand where things are coming from. I've seen different iterations. I know the applicant has looked at different iterations. I've certainly talked to you about different ways to, you know, to have it colored, to blend in. Like, we've talked about all that and they're willing to do that. Again, this is not site plan review. We're looking at legislation. We can continue to look at it for site plan review. This is not that. We're asking to do this, to opine on legislation right now and to adopt or not adopt legislation. There is another step, which is site plan review, they'll actually present that application, it will be referred to our planning board, it will be referred to our architectural review board, and that's where a lot more of these specific details will be coming in. What we're supposed to be focusing on, and we've gotten sidetracked a lot, and I've let the public do this because I wanna hear from everybody, but
We have to.
well, we have to, but also some of this is legislation. This is a public hearing on legislation, not so much the color of the building, et cetera. So but I wanna hear from everybody, so that's why we've done this. But certainly, once we opine on legislation, there will be significantly more time to look at site plan and to have those discussions as to those type of specific details.
Well, just one point of clarification though, this is a special permit application and we have been so specific in the legislation, unusually so, with the legislation being very particular about the specifics of the building, about the design. We've gone through using words like crenellation and various descriptions in the legislation to make sure that the building gets built the way that has been proposed. So I think that that ship has sailed in terms of being traditional legislation. I think we've been very detailed about how the building looks in the legislation.
Well, one of the reasons we did that is because to have a building that is not crenellated, to the extent that's a word, I think we've thrown that word away, but is because if it's one massive building wall, the building will actually look larger and have a visually greater impact on the downtown than one that has cutouts and public spaces and air to breathe. For the pedestrian experience of residents just walking down the street, the fact that it has additional setbacks, that it has these openings, I think that's something that we want, because we've heard that from residents, that the last thing we want is a giant massive building, that you feel that more than you do something like this that's separated essentially into
That's
additional
exactly
buildings.
my point. The legislation includes a description of the building. So that was exactly my point. And that's why I was talking about looking into, different architectural styles, because our legislation is tied to that.
I mean, I don't see the need to do that. I think it's the developer and the applicant has looked at those things. We've looked at them. We've looked at them with the working group. We've looked at them with Tom Curley. We've looked at them with our architecture review board. I agree with Holly that I think it wouldn't be helpful at this point. Jeremy, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think, I don't have any visceral objection, that seems extreme, but I don't have an objection to the style. I'm not an architect and people can like different things. I think at this point, that's not the question in my mind. I'm, for lack of a better term, okay with it, whether I personally think it's beautiful or not. So I don't think we need to step backwards in that direction.
All right, so any other thoughts from the town board? Or from,
Well, do we have to now, for Ed, for you to make this next decision to move this ball forward one way or another, we still have the unanswered question of units.
And we also have the draft legislation. There were some changes in this version that I just wanna walk the board through, maybe not all of them, depending on where the board goes with this alternative, some of this may change, but I just wanna point out what we did try to pick up from the last public hearing. There's some wordsmithing on page 2 with respect to the off-street bike and e-bike parking, not substantive changes there. If you go to page 4, I just wanna point out the reference here to the 1 space per unit if on-site car share is provided. And the reason I'm doing that is because there was some discussion earlier about whether it's gonna be 1 car share space, 2 or 4. And I just want the board to see this level of detail. There's no need to try to spell out some operational features of the car share in the legislation. That can be worked out later. All we're doing here in this table is setting a minimum standard for parking and referencing the car share in relation to that standard. So if car share is provided, these are the ratios. If it's not, well, it's 1-to-1 if it's provided, these are the ratios if it's not. Again, the details can be worked out later. I think that brings us to 14, the design section that we spent a lot of time on. I will say that section A, this is the reference to the comprehensive plan, and I just wanna, I know the board is aware of this, but you know, the goals of the comp plan that are relevant here, goal 2, goal 3, goal 4, goal 5, goal 14, these goals speak to policies. A policy to locate higher density in the hamlets, to facilitate a range of housing types that are affordable to a diverse range of populations, to provide a range of housing types, to encourage the placement of housing units of various economic value throughout multi-family districts. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but the idea is these are policy statements. These are not design statements, architectural statements, or even bulk standard statements about how big something should be. So I know this language in 14A came out of our first working group meeting, and it didn't start out this way, it landed this way, never been entirely happy with it. I don't know that trying to marry the scale, massing, and character with goals of the comp plan, there's a bit of dissonance in that statement for me, so the board may wanna think about either taking it out or revising it.
And Maggie did have a good point.
Yeah, I think I disagree with the point insofar, and I know Sabrina has said this too, the idea that this is inconsistent with the comp plan. I think it's clear that it's consistent with the goals that I just read and the other content that's in the plan, but again, just the idea of trying to pair design goals with goals of the comp plan, I think it's a little bit of a square peg in a round hole. So, I mean, I would suggest getting away from that particular language and either just dropping it. I don't think it's necessary. Legislation has to be consistent with the comp plan, and we've opined that it is, so I don't know that we need to say that in the code.
I would like to
Seems
take it
to
out.
I'm okay with that,
Yeah.
we remove the whole thing.
So then the other changes are on the next page, just a couple of blanks that need to be filled in, for lack of a better word. The 10 feet setback from the curb, that's in Roman numeral 2. That's a little bit of a placeholder. I think it's probably gonna wind up to be close, but we have to just, from a technical standpoint, zero that in at some point. And the other one I would point out in F, 4,000 square feet. Now that is really just a takeoff of how much they're proposing and trying to give them a floor, but at the same time allowing some flexibility. We also talked about the fact that commercial uses would be permitted. We actually made a change in the parking table for office and medical office, so that's a possibility in terms of the ground floor commercial, but
Did we say office and medical office? I thought we said no office or medical office.
no, that's been added to the table.
Cause that doesn't really activate the space.
Well, but it's a permitted use in that district, so unless you wanna require 100% retail, I mean, that would be a change, that would get away from where we've been with the legislation. In terms of the 4,000 feet, it was an effort to put a floor in with respect to retail, public facing retail and restaurant, but again, allow for some flexibility. So at 4,000 square feet, if I compare that to, if we don't include the arcade space, just for argument's sake, it's about 73% then would have to be dedicated to retail/restaurant. Now that's the board decision, maybe that's not the right percentage, but I just wanna point out that that's a decision point.
Okay. Any thoughts about that?
Kind of a hard one, we're talking about office space and medical office as opposed to retails.
No, to say that approximately 75% of the space must be restaurant or retail, but we'd allow the extra 25% to be office or medical office, things like that.
We've never seen the legislation, just to say, when you say 75% restaurant and retail, interchangeable.
I don't know why you've not seen the legislation,
We never got the latest draft.
it's been in the packet since Friday, but
We didn't get a packet.
it's posted online. You gotta follow these things, so I
We should make sure
I
everybody's getting a copy of this legislation.
No, we should get them sent, so.
It's look, it's not something that we have to resolve tonight, but
No,
it's,
but I'm asking the specific question because if you're saying that it has to be, right, if a restaurant
It
goes out of
says-
business,
No, it says of all the retail, it says at least 4,000 square feet of must be public facing retail or restaurant space.
of your 6,400 and change, 4,000 has to be restaurant / public facing retail.
right, but what is restaurant / retail? If a restaurant goes out of business, we can't rent it, it can just be regular retail. What's the
It can be, it doesn't
district?
have to be, it's not deciding between restaurant and
That's
retail.
all I'm asking, cause we haven't
It's
seen
one
it.
category.
The restaurant,
One category.
if the restaurant goes out and you can't replace it, you'd have to come back and ask for a variance essentially.
If you
Or
can't,
the alternative, just all
or the
retail?
retail.
Or retail.
Oh, it can just be retail,
Re-
whatever.
Public facing, right, but if you said to us, it has to be office space, 100%
No,
office,
no, I
that's
understand, but it's
It doesn't
retail,
say
whatever
2,000
categories
must
are
be
in
this.
the
Yes.
district now, right? Right now, the retail section in that district has certain retail categories.
correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
that it complies with that.
Public facing retail, yep.
I guess I'd be concerned with making it 100% retail or restaurant retail because we don't wanna see empty storefronts.
Yeah, that's what I took
Right.
away from the last public hearing when we talked about this.
I think 4,000 feels good, like
Yeah.
around 75%.
Yeah, with his new number, I think that's.
I think the bigger issue is if you can't find a restaurant or it's just easier to get retail, we could theoretically just be stuck with all retail.
But I want it on record that we want a diner.
I mean, that
We're fully aware.
wanting
Yes.
and getting are
We're
two
fully
different
aware.
We can't
All
legislate
things.
it, we would love that,
No,
but we
we
can't
can't.
legislate it or promise it,
We've reached out already.
we're gonna try.
We've already reached out. We're talking to people last week. But just to be clear, like back of house of restaurant is not front facing retail, right? Like if
But it's
2,000
restaurant
square feet of a
space.
restaurant though, but
It's not saying front restaurant
We can
space.
discuss this
He
more as
needs
we
a
go
chance, he
going
needs a
forward.
chance to look at this.
So let's discuss this instead of debating it now, I think. is-
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll make sure you get a copy.
I think the last two things then for the board tonight on this would be the option, whether that is something that we should explore, that our traffic consultant should spool up on.
I'm
And
sorry, what do you mean, what option?
there's the
The
58 extra studio
Oh, the
apartments.
apartment,
If
works
you-
right.
if you
But
want,
but before we get there, one thing I didn't see that we spent a while talking about was what, and maybe I missed it, what is the definition of the or maybe it wasn't going in the legislation, of the payment in lieu of parking?
We didn't come to it.
Yeah, we don't have a methodology, what the language that's in the code, I think, allows us to provide one.
But we took out, okay, we don't have like the ad valorem in here anymore.
No, it's not,
I didn't see it marked.
so,
Were we gonna see information on the, I thought there was talk between 9 and 40,000 parking in lieu, fee in lieu of parking, all that.
that's the methodology, and we don't have
That's what I was
that.
just talking about.
Are we gonna see that, hear that,
Yes,
see that, hear that?
yes.
It's not
It's
ready
not-
yet.
It's not ready yet, okay, I just didn't know where it was, okay.
I'm with you, I'd like to see it.
Would.
So that leaves the this, you know, the option, the alternative, I'll call it, of the 8 extra units, and also on the environmental assessment. You know, again, some of that's gonna depend on the answer to the first question, which project are we analyzing? But there's other work that can get started on that, we can get started on, so I guess we look for a little direction from the board as to where you wanna take this.
Okay, so Jeremy, what's your thought on that?
So when I sent around while we were sitting here, I just did a quick search, and by no means is it scientific, but the options relating to housing for people with disabilities, and if there's the same incentives that there might be for affordable housing, FFH, so I think that's more appealing to me.
I looked at that material briefly, I don't know though that it's something that we would legislate as opposed to just an opportunity for the developer to take advantage of as a funding source.
Why would we not legislate that but we would legislate affordable. Well, I mean, obviously affordable is probably something easier to do, and there's statutes for it, but it just doesn't exist in the realm of disability.
I need to spend a little time on that.
I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, were you thinking the studios?
I was just thinking out loud, I mean, not to create a whole other process for Ed and Sabrina.
I actually don't think it would be a process, honestly, I think as long as it's something we can put in there, much like, 2 units or workforce, if one of those can be, under the, the Office of Persons with Developmental Disabilities, whatever that may be, if there's a way to just put that, I don't know that it has to be a long legislation in there, I think as long as we're allowed to say it shall consist of.
And would the idea be substitute some number of workforce units for?
Whatever, substituting one of these other,
AFFH stays where it is at 6, right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
There's really absolutely people who could 100% in this community use that and want their children close to home.
Jeremy, I think it's a great idea.
I think it's a great idea. I don't know what the income requirements are or any of it, but if you take one of the studios from whatever category and put it there,
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I sort
Yeah,
of
I
represent
really like the
AMI and maybe it is just as simple as eligible for that subsidy. So workforce or.
So then it sounds like, subject to our getting comfortable with the parking underneath the building, that we're kind of choosing option 2. Is that what it sounds like?
Yeah, I like them.
Certainly viable.
I think
I
so,
wanna
if
hear
we
more
do
about the parking,
the
though.
disability options, yeah.
I would
could
say
do that.
though, we have to have at least 1 spot per unit under there for parking.
so why don't we do this? Let us look at the parking. Let us look at amending it to 6 affordable, 1, I'm not gonna claim to know the acronym. 3 workforce, let us look at how to work with the parking to see if we can adjust it, maybe that arcade space gets modified if we can squeeze in another spot or something, I don't know, let us look at it and see what we can turn around quickly.
Okay, alright.
Alright.
So in that case, I think we will adjourn this public hearing until our meeting on August 8th. Correct?
Just so move it.
Right, we don't have a meeting before then.
Is that enough time?
Is that enough time for your, so you need
Worst
to
case scenario, we can adjourn it again.
Can you please have a here
Yep, I
as
got
a reference?
Okay.
Is that enough time for us to notice it?
The 8th, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. Alright, so can I have a motion to adjourn the public hearing until August 8th?
Jeremy
I
moved.
did, so moved.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Have them use the drive.
Alright, thank you. And we're just gonna move to our resolutions.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Want me to start?
Yes.
Quick question, Ed. One of the items from the consent agenda got tabled.
Okay, so we
We need
any-
to take that, so
Are they
we
numbered?
Okay, so yeah, we've
So
removed
accept-
it,
so accept.
there was also a correction.
That way.
Oh, and adding survey to number 10.
Yeah, the outreach.
I don't think I have the latest resolutions online.
I can give you mine when we get to it.
I move to adopt items 1 through 12 with the 1 through 23 with the exception of number 12 and the amendment to number 10 as listed in the consent agenda.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll keep going. I move to retroactively approve the payment of claims in the amount of $1,191,216.06 listed on the summary AP check register and detail voucher detail reports dated July 19th, 2023. Checks were printed and distributed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, July 19th, 2023.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye. I move to accept the resignation of Christopher Hernandez from the position of part-time parking enforcement officer within the Newcastle Police Department effective August 4th, 2023. The town would like to thank Chris for his dedicated service.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move to appoint Eric Marmon as a member to the Holocaust and Human Rights Committee for a 2-year term effective August 1st, 2023 to July 31st, 2025.
I second.
All in favor?
I move, thank you, okay. I move to appoint,
We'll accept resignation.
let's see, Kenneth, okay. I move to accept the resignation of Kenneth Cooper as Chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals effective July 17th, 2023. The town would like to thank Ken for his dedicated service.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, Ken.
Thanks, Ken.
A long run.
Yes, I move to appoint Anthony Giardina as Chair to the Zoning Board of Appeals effective July 18th, 2023 through the remainder of his term ending December 31, 2025.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Okay, I move to award the bid for DPW 2023-08 Millwood Water Treatment Plant Petroleum Bulk Storage Project to Pepito Construction Company, Inc. at 867 Fair Street, Carmel, New York, for items 1 and 2 for the total amount of $493,600 effective July 11th, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move to award the bid for DPW 2023-09 Millwood Water Treatment Plant roof replacement to Barrett Roofs for a total base bid of $1,055,000, which includes items 1 to 3 effective July 11th of this great year.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I move to adjourn.
Any other resolutions?
I move to adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.